The acid stored in the demon's stomach had melted the grass, but now new blades were already rising from the ground, taller than before. It took Sonny some time to find the coins between them. The rain did not help either. But in the end, he discovered all three. The coins were identical to the first one. They were cast from gold and heavy. A beautiful wooden ship with a tree growing around its mast depicted on one side, and the face of the mysterious stranger on the other. Hiding the coins in his pack, Sonny wiped the rainwater off his face and looked at the remains of the winged demon. In a flash of lightning, he saw the whole creature, red grass growing through its white bones, darkness nesting in the empty eye sockets, and terrifying fangs crowding the massive, powerful jaws. Even in death, the creature looked frightening. "Where the hell did you come from?" With a sigh, Sonny looked at the sky, allowing rain to pelt him in the face for a while. Whatever little chance he had of tracking the flying abomination by following the trail of its blood was now gone. What else could he do? Closing his eyes for a moment, Sonny walked a few steps and retrieved a piece of gnawed wood from the mud. Just as he had remembered, it resembled a broken corner of a chest, with a strip of metal reinforcing the seam. Both the strip of metal and the wood itself had been violently torn from the rest of the chest, it seemed, by the bite of the dead demon, which meant one thing. There had to be at least one chest full of mysterious coins somewhere out there, probably. But how was Sonny supposed to find it? The Chained Isles was a vast land full of numerous dangers and hidden places. All he knew about the creature was that it had been mortally wounded by the dwellers of the dark side and then succumbed to the crushing. Speaking of the crushing, the rattling of chains thundered in the distance, announcing that the Iron Hand Island was entering the ascent phase. Sonny had to leave this place quickly. The next time he returned, the bones of the demon would most likely already be turned to dust. Gritting his teeth, Sonny walked over to the skull of the abomination and dislodged one of its fangs with a powerful kick. Picking up the jagged bone dagger, he studied it for a few moments and then put it in his pack. If all else failed, he would try to find an awakened with affinity to revelations and convince them to perform divination upon the fang. There was at least one person capable of something like that on the Chained Isles that Sonny knew of, but Sonny wasn't really willing to request help from that particular seer. Not unless there was no other choice at all. No, we're not there yet. Banishing the dark thoughts out of his mind, Sonny threw a last glance at the dead demon and the surrounding area, trying to see if he had missed a clue. However, there was nothing. With a troubled look on his face, he dissipated into the shadows and hurried back to the sanctuary. By the time he returned to the sanctuary, dawn was not that far away. Sonny snuck into the altar island and placed 2 of the 3 coins on the cold surface of the stone monolith, then waited for a bit. But nothing happened. He looked up at the sky, then back at the coins. Was it the cloud cover? Disappointed, he waited patiently for the moon to appear from beneath the dark veil of clouds. After some time, the sanctuary was finally illuminated by pale moonlight, and 2 coins on the altar immediately gleamed, reflecting it. Then, they shone with a soft light of their own. The coin he held up in his hand, however, did not. A moment later, the spell whispered, its voice entwined with the rustle of the leaves and the murmur of flowing water. "Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger." Sonny smiled. So, both the altar and the moon are needed. Hurriedly, he placed the 3rd coin on the altar and soon heard the spell repeat itself for the third time. Your shadow grows stronger. Sonny tried to remember his count, doing some math in his head. That should bring me to 201. And also, was he seeing things, or had the obsidian dagger moved ever so slightly? With a skeptical frown, Sonny tried to lift the damn knife. But just as before, nothing he did had any effect on it. He scoffed. Whatever. His recent discovery was enough of a reward in and of itself. He had received 4 shadow fragments, the equivalent of killing a fallen monster, without having to risk his life one bit. On its own, this amount was not that considerable. But what if he found 1,000, or even a few hundred of these miraculous coins? What if he reached the treasury where the chest bitten into by the winged demon was hidden? That would change a lot. The problem was that Sonny had no idea where to look. Pacing back and forth, he thought for a while and then said to himself, I should probably find an expert on all things chained isles. Somebody who might know about this type of nightmare creature, their behavior and usual haunts. Somebody who had spent long years in this region of the dream realm and was friendly enough to talk to Sonny. Now, who do I know who fits all these criteria? Sonny stopped pacing, lingered for a few moments, and then turned his head to the ring of massive altar stones. A strange expression appeared on his face. In the early morning, a lone figure approached the hallway leading to the White Feather clan's residence. Saint Tyrus and her people occupied the northern part of the sanctuary interior. Sonny had no idea what went on there, since he had never been invited, but he knew that both entrances to their compound were usually guarded. Today was no exception. Before Sonny could step foot inside the hallway, a young warrior in a cuirass decorated with etchings of hawk feathers appeared from an alcove and glanced at him with a vigilant expression. State your business, Awakened. Sonny stared at the young man with an earnest expression, then smiled. I am here to see Master Roan. He once told me to come find him if I needed anything. So, here I am, in need of something. Can you fetch him quickly? The guard blinked a couple of times, then frowned. What is this about exactly? Sonny grinned, lingered for a few moments, and then said honestly, demon hunting. Sonny had no idea if Master Roan was currently in the sanctuary, but judging by the fact that the guard did not immediately send him away, he probably was. The young Awakened gave Sonny an evaluating look, then whistled softly and returned to his alcove. Nothing seemed to happen for a few minutes, but then Sonny heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A young woman wearing a simple white garment appeared from behind the curve of the corridor and glanced at him, then gestured for him to follow. Sonny shifted slightly, then moved forward, walking behind the girl. What would you know? I am walking into the lair of a legacy clan of my own free will. Never say never, I guess. He had not expected himself to do something like this anytime soon. He thought he would only do this in more dire situations, but here he was. Instead of walking further into the compound, they entered a narrow staircase and ascended to the very top of the sanctuary. There, massive stone monoliths lay flat on top of the menhirs, creating an almost uninterrupted surface. There was a whole separate world above the citadel. Grass and moss covered the expansive stone circle, which stretched far into the distance. Sonny could see guards standing at the outer edge of it, keeping watch on the neighboring islands. Here and there, siege weapons were placed at irregular intervals, aimed at the sky. Right above the White Feather residence, a graceful structure was built on top of the Ring of Menhirs, with tall windows and beautiful ivy climbing its walls. It resembled a large stone chateau. The walls of the mansion were still wet from rain and shone softly in the light of the rising sun. A path led from its door to an airy pavilion at the edge of the stone monolith, with a round table standing in its center. The mighty griffin lay near the pavilion, its head hidden under one of its massive eagle wings, while Master Roan himself seemed to be enjoying a hearty breakfast. The young woman gestured for Sunny to go forward and walked toward the mansion, soon disappearing behind its door.
I guess this is how saints live. Must be nice.
For a moment, Sunny was full of envy. The chateau on top of the sanctuary seemed so beautiful, simple, and peaceful. The complete opposite of the noisy, overcrowded, and poisoned world where humans came from. Of course, he knew that peace was a lie. The dream realm might have seemed like a paradise sometimes, but that paradise was dire and twisted, hiding all kinds of horrors that were ready to descend upon you at any moment.
Whatever. My house is much better anyway. It has all a man can need, and then some. I bet they don't even have designer lamps here.
It's pitiful, really. Entering the pavilion, Sunny greeted Master Roan with all the respect he could muster. The older man smiled and invited Sunny to sit with a relaxed gesture.
Good morning, Sunless. I must admit I didn't expect you to seek me out so soon. Did something happen?
Sunny sat down, smiled politely, then shook his head.
Nothing that I would want to concern you with. I am not here to talk about something that happened, but more about something that might happen.
Master Roan raised an eyebrow and laughed.
Don't tell me. Wait, are you here with a business proposal? Am I about to become a customer of Sunny's brilliant emporium?
Sunny choked.
No. What? Where did you hear about that?
The handsome master grinned.
I hear things.
Sunny tried to shove down the prickle of anxiety and paranoia.
What are those bastards saying behind my back? Or have I not been nearly as stealthy as I thought?
Sunny forced out a smile, then shook his head.
No, I am not here as a highly respected, rich and famous entrepreneur. Nor am I here as a well-regarded member of the Wilderness Survival faculty of the Awakened Academy. I'm actually here as an advanced scout of the Sanctuary of Noctis.
Master Roan grew serious.
Oh, continue.
Sunny nodded, then paused for a moment. He wanted to make sure he chose the right words. He wanted to find anything that could lead him to find more of these coins without letting information on them slip. Finally, he said,
After we parted 2 days ago, I returned to the sanctuary. On my way back, however, I rested for a while on the Iron Hand Island. And there, well, I found the remains of a nightmare creature there.
The older man frowned slightly.
That's not unheard of. Iron Hand is usually safe, but you know how the Chained Isles are. Nightmare creatures migrate, sometimes naturally, sometimes to avoid the crushing.
Sunny scratched the back of his head.
That's true. However, the abomination was a fallen demon. It is strange to see one that close to the sanctuary, and especially so because I have never seen or even heard about that type of creature. It was rather scary.
Roan's frown deepened.
A fallen demon on the Iron Hand Island. That is indeed strange. You've done well to bring me this information, Sunless. Did you get a good look at it by any chance?
Sunny sighed.
Well, you see, it was in the depths of night.
Then he smiled.
But luckily I can see perfectly in the dark. So, yes, I got a very good look. Let me describe it.
He described the demon to the best of his ability, not sparing any detail. He even remembered every wound and injury on the abomination's body, hoping that their nature could shine a light on what exactly had killed the bastard. The longer Sonny talked, the darker Master Roan's face became. Finishing his report, Sonny glanced at the older man and asked,
"So, what type of demon is it? And why have I never encountered one before?"
Master Roan shook his head.
You are lucky to have never met one of these fiends, kid. They are a very rare and vicious breed of nightmare creatures, known as chain worms. Luckily, it was already dead. Otherwise, I doubt that we would be having this conversation right now. Even I am reluctant to face demons such as this alone. No offense, Sunless, but if that thing was alive, you wouldn't be here right now.
Sonny furrowed his brows, then asked cautiously,
Chain worms? Why are they called that?
The older man sighed, then looked at the breathtaking vista of the chained aisles in front of them. After a while, he said,
It is because these creatures feed on metal. Once one of the heavenly chains is weakened, they appear from the dark side to feast on it. Steel weapons are useless against these abominable things, so fighting one, let alone many, is almost an impossible task.
Master Roan stared into the distance with a bleak expression, and then added darkly,
I've seen whole islands crumble into the below because of their hunger.
Master Roan grew silent for a few moments, then smiled after noticing Sonny's troubled expression.
The heavenly chains near the sanctuary are all fine, though, so you have nothing to worry about.
Sonny felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't entirely sure he believed Roan about that. But that wasn't at all what troubles him the most about this new information. Chain worms. Massive creatures that ate steel and iron. Sonny had already received a piece of valuable information that could help him find the mysterious treasure, but he wanted to know more. But before he could ask another question, a sudden shadow shrouded the pavilion, the stone chateau, and the expanse of weathered stone surrounding it, as though a cloud moved across the sun, hiding it. The sleeping griffin stirred and raised its head, its vertical pupils narrowing. Just a moment later, the shadow disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. Simultaneously, a strange sound reached Sonny's ears. It was as though 1,000 wings rustled as they cut the air. Then, a woman was suddenly standing at the edge of the stone ring, her silhouette outlined against the rising sun by a bright halo. It seemed as though she had always been there, but Sonny could swear that there was no one near them just a second ago. Oh, the woman was tall and slender, her posture straight like an arrow. She was wearing light steel armor, its pauldrons and greaves decorated with white feathers. Her long blonde hair was fluttering in the wind like a cascade of pale gold. When she turned around, Sonny saw 2 piercing amber eyes staring at him. He shivered. Her face was cold and stunningly beautiful, more akin to that of a goddess than of a human being. The woman's pupils were narrow and vertical, exactly like those of the mighty griffin. The ruler of the sanctuary had returned home. Shit. With a shudder, Sonny forced himself to look away and hurriedly bowed. This was his second time meeting Tyrus of the White Feather clan, also known by her true name, Skytide, one of the few saints of the human race, the demigod in charge of the Chained Island. Just by virtue of existing, the saint exerted a strange influence on everything that surrounded her. It was not oppressive, like the dreadful aura of Gunlog's golden armor. No, not like that. It was just different, as if the world itself was reacting to her. The blades of grass seemed to bend slightly toward her, the wind sang subtly lower as she approached, and even sunlight appeared to become a bit brighter in her presence. Master Roan shifted and rose from his seat. "Good morning, sunshine." Sunny flinched.
What? Oh, right.
It took him a couple of seconds to realize that the fearless Griffin Rider was addressing his wife and not him.
Sunshine? Sunshine? That is how he addressed a saint? Well, she is his wife after all, I guess.
Once he thought about it, everything made sense. But still, the idea of addressing a transcendent as sunshine seemed very weird for some reason. It didn't feel right. Sunny cautiously looked up and saw a wide smile on Roan's face. St. Tyrus herself, however, was as cold as ever. She did not seem to share his casual demeanor, at least not now. "Good morning, Ro." Even her voice was cold and heavy, like the howl of an approaching storm. Turning her head slightly, St. Tyrus looked at Sunny with a silent question. Countless poets would have been ruined if they saw the elegant curve of her eyebrow. Sunny was rendered speechless by her attention. Her beauty was overwhelming as it was frightening. Master Roan patted Sunny on the shoulder and said, "Awakened Sunless visited to tell me about a demon he encountered on the Iron Hand Island. It was a chain worm. Already dead, fortunately. Still, we should explore the nearby island, don't you think?" St. Tyrus did not respond right away. She kept her gaze on Sunny for a bit longer than was comfortable for him. Eventually, she looked away. Sunny felt his shoulders sag as if a weight had been lifted. Then she shook her head. "No need. The only falling chain on the Isles is far away from the sanctuary, connecting Shipwreck Island to the Twisted Rock. This is where the chain worm came from. I just saw it myself." She turned away, then sighed slightly. Suddenly she seemed more human. "Of course, we will have to prepare. All islands are connected after all. After the Twisted Rock falls, its demise will echo through the entire region. Many islands will shift, causing changes to the severity of the crushing on others. The migration patterns of the nightmare creatures will be affected too." Tyrus was only speaking to her husband. Suddenly, Sunny felt like he was overhearing a conversation that was not meant for him.
"I should probably get going,"
he thought. Sunny cleared his throat, then said awkwardly,
It's been an honor to meet you again, Lady Tyrus. I shall take my leave then."
Skytide nodded indifferently, then said, "Thank you for informing us of your finding, Awakened Sunless." He nodded, then rose from his seat and cautiously took a few steps away. When Sunny was almost out of the pavilion, however, the cold voice of the saint stopped him. "Wait." He turned around and forced out a smile.
"Yes? How can I help you?"
Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then said in a calm, emotionless tone, "You come from the Forgotten Shore, if I'm not mistaken." It wasn't a question. Sunny nodded.
"Yeah. What about it?"
The beautiful saint paused, eyes narrowing at Sunny's short, clipped response. Then she asked, "Song of the Fallen, do you know her?"
"Cassia? Why bring her up?"
Sunny smiled, hiding his emotions.
"Yes, we've met. Why?"
St. Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then said, "Good. Song of the Fallen will be visiting the sanctuary soon. She will be glad to see a familiar face, I think." With that, Skytide turned away, letting Sunny know that he was free to go. He hesitated for a second, then walked away. As soon as neither Master Roan nor St. Tyrus could see his face, a dark expression appeared on it.
"Coming to visit? What the hell is she coming here for?"
Indeed,
Just like Sunny, Cassia had chosen Chained Isles as the region to anchor herself to. Their reason was most likely also the same, the proximity of the Isles to the Hollow Mountains. Luckily, she was not a resident of the sanctuary. Sunny had no idea how the blind girl had managed it, but she somehow convinced Clan Valor to let her and her escort anchor themselves to the second human citadel in the region, the Night Temple. While Sanctuary was closer to the southern border of the region, Night Temple was situated far to the north, almost on the outskirts of the Misty Death Zone. For that reason, the two of them had been comfortably separated and had not seen each other, even once in the past months. But now, that was about to change. Exiting the White Feather residence, Sunny grimaced. Glad to see a familiar face? Hell, I doubt it. The sanctuary was slowly waking up. Now that the sun had risen, groups of awakened were preparing to venture outside, while those who had stuff to do in the citadel itself were going about their business. A few of them greeted Sunny as he walked toward the altar island. By now, he should have been able to return to the real world. After everything he had discovered during the night, there was a flame burning inside his chest that demanded action. His eyes gleamed when he thought about the mysterious treasure hidden somewhere out there in the darkness. Despite Sunny's rapacious tendencies, he knew how to keep his avarice in check. Well, most of the time. Shipwreck Island. Sunny had never been that far away from the sanctuary, but he had heard about that deadly place. The Shipwreck Island was situated almost at the center of the Chained Isles, far removed from both human citadels. The nightmare creatures there were especially ferocious, and the islands themselves were far more bizarre and dangerous than those closer to the edges of the region. If one could somehow survive the crushing and look upon the Chained Isles from above, they would see that there was a vast empty space at the very heart of this shattered land. Some people assumed that this was where the Ivory Tower had once been chained, before all 7 of its anchors were broken. After that, the islands bordering the tear slowly fell into the sky below, one after another, making it grow wider and wider. The hole at the heart of the Chained Isles was slowly expanding, and one day, thousands of years from now, it was probably going to devour the whole region. But Sunny had no interest in that remote future. What concerned him right now was that the Shipwreck Island was on the very edge of the tear, and as such, presented a lot of danger for a young awakened like him. If Sunny wanted to venture out that far, he would have to study and thoroughly prepare for a long and perilous expedition. And in the meantime, he had to hurry to the real world. Even though he felt the call of treasure with every fiber of his being, desperate to reduce the gap between himself and Nephis, the things he had to do back in reality were crucial. Calm down. It's nothing serious, really. Approaching the white altar, he glanced at the obsidian dagger suspiciously, then placed his hand on the cold marble. There's no reason to worry, so... The lid of the steel sarcophagus silently opened, letting out beams of light and clouds of cool mist. Sunny yawned and climbed out of the sleeping pod, then stretched with a satisfied smile on his lips. His body felt refreshed and energized, as if he just had a long, perfectly comfortable sleep. Not at all like what he had endured in the past 2 months while using cheaper academy pods. Now that is what I call money well spent. Indeed, the luxurious machine might have been the best purchase he had ever made, not counting the mantle of the underworld, of course. Leaving the compact underground fortress of his basement, Sunny walked over to the kitchen, glanced at the broken remains of his fridge with a bit of shame,
and retrieved a few ingredients to cook himself breakfast from the debris. Out here in the real world, it was currently early morning. He sent the happy shadow outside to observe the surroundings and then turned on the stove. Real eggs, real lettuce and tomatoes, real bread, real bacon, real coffee, real juice. It took him just a few minutes to cook himself a breakfast that would have been considered the epitome of a lavish lifestyle by any inhabitant of the outskirts. Walking to a dining table that was too large for one person, he placed his breakfast on its synthwood surface and activated his communicator. There were no new messages, and he didn't know what else to do with that thing. Usually, people of his age would have an active presence on the network and feeds breaking with all kinds of news, events, and videos. But Sonny had almost no digital presence whatsoever, nor did he want to have one. He knew how to access various resources and services, of course, and many of the things on the network had once been the stuff of his dreams. The unlimited amount of games, books, shows, and entertainment of all sorts was on the tip of his finger. But, ironically, now that Sonny had free access to all these alluring things, he had no time to dive into any of them. Right now, he had too much to do, and his dreams were filled with only clangors of steel and nightmarish abominations. Maybe one day. Slowly consuming his food, Sonny used the communicator to quickly stretch and describe the coin he had found, keeping its true secrets and capabilities to himself, of course. Outside, his neighbors were preparing to face the new day. The sun was rising above the giant city, and crowds of people were on their way to work. The shadow found a hidden spot on the porch of his new home and observed the quiet street from its shelter. It saw a few PTVs drive by, humming slowly as they rolled or levitated toward the exit from the terrace district. Several well-dressed adults walked by, heading for the public transport terminal. Sometime later, it was time for the students in school uniforms to follow them. Sonny sipped coffee and observed these children through the shadow, trying to imagine himself having such a life. Waking up in a safe home, eating the delicious food a parent had prepared for you, not having to think about where your next meal would come from. Going to a place where an unlimited amount of knowledge and mentorship was available to you, completely free. Having no real worries and no real fears. Just living. What a strange existence that would be. He stared at the students with a strained expression. He was curious, but he felt a twinge of longing in his chest. They were so soft. Their clothes were soft, their eyes were soft, and their lives, too, were soft. How are these children going to survive in the real world? The real world was hard, cruel, and unforgiving. Just like Sonny himself was. A person like him had a much better chance of surviving in such a world, not to mention the hellscape of the dream realm. Finally, the stream of students grew thin. One of the last to walk past Sonny's house was a young girl of around 14 years. She was about as tall as him, with pale skin and black hair. The girl seemed to be a bit uncomfortable in her own body, like all teenagers tended to be. And the school uniform did no favors to her slender physique. Her dark eyes, however, were very sharp and clear. Luckily, unlike her brother, Rain seemed to have taken after their mother, who was a rather attractive young woman from what Sonny remembered. Even though she was still just a child, he could already see that one day the teenage girl walking past his home was going to become a real beauty. Finishing his coffee, Sonny placed the empty cup on the table and sighed. He whispers, "Found you." Indeed, the awkward 14-year-old girl was his little sister, Rain. And indeed, it wasn't a coincidence that Sonny had bought this exact house in this exact district of the city While the terrace neighborhood was nice and charming, the real reason he had chosen this home in particular was because it stood next to the place where Rain lived. It was on this street, a year and a few months ago, that he had watched from the shadows as she was having dinner with her adopted family, their warm and happy life displayed for him to see through the wide window of their brightly illuminated living room. Well, now Sonny had a living room and a wide window of his own, even though there was usually only darkness behind it. Back then, he had become painfully aware that his fantasy of saving his little sister was empty and misguided. Rain didn't need to be saved, least of all by a troubled outskirts stray like him, a ghost of the past that she most likely did not even remember. If he had knocked on her door on that night, nothing in her life would have changed for the better. But Sonny wasn't the same penniless kid anymore. He was an awakened, one marked as a special strategic asset by the government. He was considerably wealthy, connected, even powerful. But deep down, he still believed that the statement held true. His clothes and circumstances might have changed, but Sonny himself remained the same, twisted and damaged, like anyone who had seen the truth of what this world would be. What's worse, now that he had risen above his previous pathetic self, he had a whole swarm of new, much more serious problems. Nephis, the Sovereigns, the legacy of Mysterious Weaver, all of these things promised a future full of turmoil and danger. He was not exactly the kind of person who had good things to offer anybody. So no, Sonny had not changed his mind about keeping himself out of Rain's life. He wasn't going to approach her, and he certainly had no desire to meet her face to face. There was one problem, however. Now that Sonny was an awakened, statistically, Rain's chances of becoming infected by the nightmare spell herself had grown. But even if he forgot about that statistical correlation, there was still a possibility that she would end up in the first nightmare, no matter how small. By now, Sonny was 18, and Rain was 14. Almost every person infected by the spell had fallen victim to it while being older than 16 and younger than 19, which meant that there were about 2 years left before Rain would be in real danger, and about 4 before she would be out of it. Even if they were more or less strangers and didn't owe anything to each other, Sonny felt responsible for her. Perhaps Rain did not remember him, due to how little she had been at the time of their separation. At least, that's what Sonny thought. She was so young. But Sonny, he remembered everything. To him, she was the last memento of their long-lost home. Now that he could pull some strings behind the scenes to ensure that her chances of surviving the first nightmare were enhanced, be it through access to better battle instructions or something else, he couldn't just sit still and do nothing. He had had every intention of using every perk he had. But to do that, he first needed to understand how well Rain was being prepared already. He heard about the nicer schools building preparation for the nightmare right into the curriculum. Perhaps her school had done the same. If she was lucky, maybe she was already being prepared for the worst. But on the off chance she wasn't, and because he knew he would be able to prepare her better than most government-sanctioned programs ever could, Sonny had bought a house near the place where she lived. He also let his shadows loose to explore the neighborhood and spy on her and her family. Sonny grimaced as he finished his coffee. When I put it that way, he thought, it sure sounds a bit creepy. Sonny stood up, yawned, and shrugged. He was an awakened whose power lay in shadows, deceit, and bloodshed. Before that, he was a street rat, willing to do anything in order to survive.
Normal middle class and richer humans had no idea about what he had gone through, what he had done, and what he was capable of. And he preferred it that way. If they did know, they would probably be horrified. So, a little hint of creepiness was only to be expected. Putting on a warm hoodie, he walked outside, hid his hands in his pockets, and headed toward the public transport terminal at a slow pace. His shadow was a few hundred meters ahead, stealthily following Rain and keeping an eye on her. No one was the wiser to its presence. Sonny sighed and looked at the cloudy sky. Time to go to school, I guess. Rain went to a rather elite school, as it turned out. Judging by the prices of the homes in the Terrace District, Sonny knew that her adopted family was reasonably well-to-do, but it seemed that he had underestimated either their wealth or their connections. Sonny breathed a small sigh of relief. That meant she wasn't going in blind. The other awakened, all of the ones from wealthier families at least, seemed to have had some level of training that had started early in school. Some even said that they had beginner-level combat training in their physical fitness classes. The school was not the most prestigious out there, but it was close. Enough that only the kids of government officials and conglomerate heirs attended it. For the most part, of course. There were a few kids who seemed to be there because of their academic achievements, but not enough to make a difference. Sonny chewed his lip, thinking about the poor kids on scholarship. Did they even stand a chance of fitting in? I wonder if any are from the outskirts. The children of government servants arrived on public transport, like Rain. The wealthy industry titans' children, however, arrived in expensive PTVs, which were controlled by personal drivers. Sitting at a table in a cafe a kilometer or so away from the heavily guarded entrance to the school, Sonny suppressed the desire to whistle. That looks like something straight out of a drama. I wonder if I'll see someone getting slapped in the face today. Suddenly, remembering his first encounter with Master Jet, Sonny coughed and rubbed his cheek in embarrassment, or any other kind of dramatics. The happy shadow was still following Rain, stealthily moving from one shadowy patch to another. Then, it waited for a good opportunity and dove inside the shadow of one of the kids walking toward the same classroom as her. Sonny got comfortable and ordered a few pastries and a pot of tea. He couldn't quite believe that he was going to waste time attending school of all things, even if it was in that very strange manner. He hadn't been to school in a dozen years already, not counting the months spent in the academy. Well, this should be interesting. A couple of hours later, Sonny was ready to claw his eyes out. Not because the lessons taught to Rain in school were boring, but because he had to watch a bunch of entitled kids exist in an enclosed space and make it as hard for everyone to learn anything as possible. Sonny groaned. Do they all have to be entitled brats? He thought. Despite the elite school seeming like a place of learning, it was, in fact, more like a battlefield. The hidden politics among the students and the hierarchy of numerous cliques they formed were more complex than the ruthless strife between the factions in the Bright Castle, and judging by their behavior, just as dire. But it definitely was not. No one's life was at stake. No one was going to be exiled and starved to death if they did a wrong thing. All of this was simply about prestige, vanity, and standing. It was all a hormone-fueled mess. Sonny scowled. It's all so utterly foolish, he thought. However, once Sonny thought about it a bit more, he realized that it was not quite that simple. It definitely wasn't foolish for the students, and perhaps wasn't completely superfluous.
These kids were put under immense pressure, assigned a numerical value, and forced to compete against each other. As a result, they inevitably developed a fierce resentment toward their rivals, which was only made deeper by the deep sense of insecurity this system instilled in them. No wonder they were at each other's throats. But for what? The school was, in fact, not only meant to teach the kids the skills necessary to survive and thrive in the real world, but also to destroy the very same softness Sunny had pondered about a few hours earlier. It wasn't hard to imagine that, at the end of it all, the best and most resilient students would become harsh and jaded, while the rest would simply be broken and discarded. It was a wasteful system and one of very questionable effectiveness. Sipping tea in the quiet cafe, Sunny shook his head. Rich people. They could be happy, but they refuse to make anything simple. Luckily for him, Rain seemed to be unaffected by this vitriol. Her classmates, however, seemed to be more interested in the dramatics and competition than actually studying. Rain sat calmly at the back of the class, avoiding getting embroiled in any drama, and dutifully learned everything the teachers explained to the students. The lessons themselves, surprisingly, turned out to be very interesting. Sunny even found himself enjoying these hours very much. There had not been any combat lessons yet, but he did manage to catch the school's version of the Wilderness Survival course, as well as listen to a rather intriguing lecture about the early exploration of the Dream Realm. He also saw a lesson dedicated to various nightmare creatures, their biology, capabilities, and weaknesses. If he had known that much during his first months on the Forgotten Shore, well, it would not have changed much. Sunny's face dropped at that realization. No matter how much a person knew about these things, no sleeper was meant to face challenges of that magnitude. And yet, he couldn't help but feel a bit wistful. He had been denied access to this treasury of knowledge as a kid. Who knew how his life would have turned out otherwise? It would have been a lot more interesting and enjoyable, at least. As the end of the day grew closer, Sunny had some idea of Rain's depth of knowledge and overall readiness for the nightmare spell. But he still did not know how well she was really being trained. He had to see her during a lesson in combat for that. After a while, Sunny had grown a little bit bored. Listening to a lecture about spell tech absent-mindedly, he looked around the cafe. At this hour, there weren't a lot of people there, but that was swiftly changing. The white-collar workers from the surrounding buildings were now on their lunch break, as were senior students of the school. Several noisy groups were occupying tables near him, so he couldn't help but catch bits and pieces of their conversations. No way! When's it coming out? In a couple of months, I think. Who will play the female lead then? No, wait. Let me guess. These guys were discussing some upcoming film, excitedly wondering about the casting. Something about their conversation appeared strange to Sunny, but he didn't pay it too much attention. None. That is the true mindset of a battle master. No way he meant to say that. Who do you think Lord Mongrel is, a nobody? Of course not. He only said that because he considers social status and renown meaningless. It's beneath him. In the eyes of a warrior, such things are not even worth mentioning. The only thing that matters is your strength. That's why he hides his noble upbringing. Sunny stared at a couple of young men who were in the middle of a heated debate, then shook his head. He smirked. That's hilarious, he thought. What are the chances? Apparently, there was someone else out there with a similar alias, and that guy, from what Sunny could hear, was not only a total buffoon, but also went around calling himself a lord, pretending to be some wise philosopher and teaching people how to be a true warrior. What an idiot. Well, figures.
Only an idiot would choose such an alias on purpose. I wonder what this guy's problem is. He has to be horribly insecure about something for sure.
Then, however, he had to focus on Rain again, because she was finally heading for the school's dojo. The combat lesson was about to begin. The instructor turned out to be an actual awakened. It was a man in his late 30s, with a mighty build and cold eyes of an experienced fighter. Sonny couldn't tell what aspect the man possessed, but he was obviously not a sheltered non-combatant. Rain's instructor was the real deal. Sonny wondered if he was still active in the dream realm. He had taken a job teaching students. Was it because he wanted to and felt a duty to prepare new potential sleepers? Or was he pulled into it? Or was it a government assignment to make sure some rich family's kids got all of the training they needed? In any case, it was a good thing for Rain. Over the next hour or so, Sonny watched the students train and fight each other with various weapons. He expected them to use fake ones, but to his surprise, the awakened instructor insisted that the kids both wear heavy protective gear and wield real ones, even if the weapons were blunted to not pose a real danger.
Good approach, I guess.
Sonny tensed. Was Rain ready for this? Rain's level was better than he had expected. Not comparable to someone like Castor or Nephis, of course, but miles better than anything he would have been able to do at her age. She was swift, nimble, and strategic, utilizing every opening the opponent presented to her full advantage. She seemed to prefer using ranged combat, but could hold her own in a melee with the help of a wide range of weapons, from a long spear to a lightweight saber. Some kids were better than her, and some were worse, but none could compare to her in terms of wits. And yet, a deep frown appeared on Sonny's face.
There is one thing that is lacking.
Viciousness. His sister was not nearly vicious enough. Judging that he had seen everything he needed to, Sonny rose and left the cafe, then headed home. The happy shadow left the premises of the school unnoticed and soon wrapped itself around his body, but not before showing how proud and satisfied it was with its flawless performance. Sonny smirked at his shadow.
Yeah, you did well.
On his way back, Sonny was thinking over what he had learned about Rain. His sister seemed to be smart and well-adjusted, and receiving the kind of training most kids in this world could only dream about. But was it enough? He did not know. No one could know, really, not until they were thrown into the fire. After he had returned from the Forgotten Shore, several people told him that they would never have survived in that hell. But their words rang hollow to Sonny, because how would they know? Until a person was thrown into a situation like that, there was no way to tell what would remain of their resolve once everything else had been stripped away. Brave people broke, while cowardly ones found strength that they had not even known was inside them. Kind people became cruel, while cruel people became lost. Only by looking at a mirror of a nightmare could one truly see their real face. Before Sonny entered the Forgotten Shore, he had thought himself to be strong, but once there, he had learned the hard way that his strength was brittle and illusory, that it could shatter under the smallest amount of pressure. To survive, he had to build within himself a new kind of strength, one that could not be broken by anything or anyone. That was how he had survived. How was he supposed to know how Rain would measure against the horrors of the spell? And how was he supposed to make her chances of surviving its trials better? Consumed by these thoughts, Sonny returned home and tried to put his mind at ease. This was not something that he could decide in a hurry anyway, and he had time. She was still young. She still had a couple of years before her fate would be sealed, for better or for worse. For now, he had many other things to do. Activating the Dreamscape pod, Sonny climbed inside and closed his eyes. Time to relax a little. At least out there in the Dreamscape, things were simple. He just had to fight, learn, and win. Granted, his previous visit to the Colosseum had turned out to be a disappointment, but Sonny had high hopes for more elite arenas. He just had to gain enough victories to enter them. About 70 more to gain access to the lower-ranked professional dreams. Not that hard. At least, not for him. He had lost all interest in dueling with amateurs and couldn't wait to meet better opponents who could teach him a variety of polished styles. Sonny yawned. Better do it quickly. I'm not sure how much more of the roaring lion style I can take. Appearing on the sand of the Colosseum, Sonny sighed behind the mask and willed the Soul Serpent to assume the form of the somber Odachi. That's weird. For some reason, today, many more people wanted to challenge him. A literal crowd of Awakened assembled around Sonny in a span of a minute, staring at him with disturbing intensity. Also, the challengers seemed to be way more talkative. What's up with these fools? Hey, Mongrel, what's your real name? Sonny stared at the young woman challenging him, then answered with slight irritation. Mongrel. She smiled knowingly, as if struck by a mysterious epiphany, then asked, And what style do you practice? Sonny frowned behind the mask. What the hell was that question? I practice no style. The girl opened her mouth to say something else, but he interrupted her by stepping forward and activating the challenge. 2 seconds later, the girl's dead body was already turning into a rain of sparks. Why are they so chatty today? I don't have a lot of time. If I want to enter a professional arena next time, I have to be fast. Looking at the crowd of Awakened, Sonny sighed dejectedly and growled, Words are worthless. Silence is gold. Don't waste my breath. The challengers looked at each other with weirdly enlightened expressions, then grew quiet. That's better. At least they're an understanding bunch. Now that people seem to have lost their desire to chat uselessly before every damn duel, things went much faster. Sonny had no plans of copying the style of these talented amateurs today, so he could be as efficient as possible. It still required him to exert himself, though. They were all Awakened after all, each and every one of them. Behind the black mask, Sonny was sweating an ocean and silently whispering curses. But what could he do? He just had to get it done. Time to grind through and boost his stats. Wasn't that how these sleepers said it? Sonny wondered. When they would waste time in the common rooms of the dorms playing video games? Guess this is similar enough. All right, time to grind. Because he took no breaks between the duels, his reserves of Shadow Essence grew dangerously low at some point. Sonny was forced to command the Soul Serpent to return to his body to accelerate the accumulation of essence and slow down its expenditure. Noticing that he had dismissed his sword, the challengers assumed that he wasn't going to fight anymore, and sighed with disappointment. Glancing at them, Sonny gritted his teeth and hissed, Next! He was not that far from accomplishing his goal for today, and the mantle of the underworld was like a weapon itself, especially if he manipulated its weight to make his blows carry the weight of a mountain, metaphorically speaking. His aching muscles protested, but he endured the torment and continued. Just a few more. As the next challenger stepped forward, Sonny dashed toward him, deflected the glancing blow of a spiked mace with a vambrace, and struck the young man in the face with all the strength he could muster. The black onyx gauntlet grew terribly heavy as it flew through the air,
connected solidly, and caused the young man's skull to explode, more or less. Sonny secretly panted and cursed. I can't keep this up much longer. Luckily, he only had a few more duels to win. About an hour after he had entered the Colosseum, Sonny finally reached enough victories to qualify for a better arena. By then, he was so tired that he felt like throwing up. God damn it, that was incredibly tough. All in a day's work, I guess. Throwing one last glance at the crowd of Silent Awakened, Sonny shook his head. What a bunch of weirdos. With that, he gave the dreamscape the command and left the illusion, both exhausted and satisfied with his progress. Left alone on the sand of the Colosseum, the challengers remained quiet for a few minutes. After a while, one of them said, "He shook his head." Another Awakened sighed heavily, then said in a solemn tone, "Yes, we are not worthy enough." Sonny crawled out of the simulation pod and lay on the cold floor for a while, breathing heavily. How come an illusory arena is so exhausting? The designers of the dreamscape were really weird. The people who frequented the Colosseum were even weirder, though. Sonny couldn't even begin to understand the quirks of their behavior. That's how subcultures are, I guess. After a while, he stood up and went upstairs to make himself some food and replenish all the energy he had spent during his intense and taxing hour. Sonny made himself a light dinner, devoured it with wolfish hunger, and then relaxed in a chair while drinking a cup of delicious tea. As he rested, his communicator buzzed. He took a sip of tea and then opened the message Effie had sent him. "Hey, doofus, have you seen this? I think I found a new boyfriend for your girlfriend." The message ended with a winking emoticon and an attached video link. Perplexed, Sonny clicked on the link and spit out all of his tea. Forgetting to wipe his chin, he stared at the holographic screen in front of him with wide eyes. What the hell is this? The video was of him, of his duel in the dreamscape to be precise. Caught in stunning quality, the recording of his short duel against the young man in azure armor was playing on a loop, set to menacing and epic music. The caption read, "Mongrel victorious." Sonny stared at it for a while, then slowly lowered his gaze and looked at the view count beneath the video. 7 zeros? Was that Leo Stryker guy famous? Sonny only came to his senses because of the pressure of his flaw. Gritting his teeth, he sent Effie a short message. "I have not seen this. What the hell is happening?" Feeling apprehensive, he went on the network and typed "Mongrel Dreamscape" into the search bar. Immediately, thousands upon thousands of results showed, all featuring the fearsome image of Weaver's mask. Sonny gulped. Oh no. Oh no. He opened the first link and almost spat blood. Mongrel defeats Leo Stryker, Taoist Safer, and the Fool in 3 strikes. The short montage of a bunch of his duels played. This one had even more views. That doesn't even make sense. Were those two famous as well? What 3 strikes? I hit the second guy twice. Feeling an approaching headache and a bit of panic, Sonny scrolled through the feed, growing paler and paler with each second. There were countless videos,
captions and discussions. Thousands of people were fervently debating his duels, his identity, and the hidden meaning of his words. It seemed as if they had somehow become convinced that he was some sort of profound sage, going around sprouting words of enlightened wisdom. There were whole discussion boards dedicated to interpreting his teachings. Oh no! Sonny grabbed his head, realizing that the buffoon he had heard being discussed in the cafe was him. Come to think of it, many of Rain's classmates had been talking about this stuff too. Had she seen this garbage as well? He groaned. At least no one seemed to have any idea about who Mongrel was. His efforts to obfuscate his identity were working, as was Weaver's mask. But the worst was still to come. As Sonny was studying the mess he had made, new notifications started appearing in the feed. Mongrel returns. Mongrel decimates the Colosseum. 70 victories in 60 minutes. Lord Mongrel's shocking rampage. Mongrel is Saint bastard son, confirmed. He closed his eyes. Gods, what is this crap? Opening a random link, he read in horror. Mongrel #1 sympathizer. I was there, guys. It was incredible. He was like a natural disaster. So awesome. Random shoe. Did you hear what he said? Mongrel #1 sympathizer. Words are worthless. Silence is gold. So profound. My whole outlook on life changed. Random shoe. Wow. My dad used to say the same thing when I tried to talk to him after school. Mongrel #1 sympathizer. Wait. Shoe? Are you Mongrel's son? User Random Shoe changed their name to Mongrel's son. Mongrel's son. Aren't we all Mongrel's children? Sonny closed the link and went to another page. Silence is gold. One strike of a sword is worth more than 1,000 words. An in-depth analysis of the post-neo-nihilistic philosophy of Mongrel. Post-neo... what? Stupefied, he opened another link. Reacting to Mongrel's 70 wins. You gasp, you lose. And another. Mongrel does not believe in styles. Styles only separate men. And another. I spent a night with Mongrel, a candid confession of a former idol trainee. Deactivating the communicator, he sat quietly for a while, and then groaned again. Oh, no! The new recording of Mongrel's stunning performance in the Colosseum flew around the globe in no time at all. Starved for new information about the mysterious demonic fighter, people became glued to the screens of their communicators. They were not disappointed by what they saw, to say the least. Mongrel's already considerable renown, or infamy, depending on who you asked, became even more widespread. Sonny had grown up in the outskirts, so he had never been really exposed to both the network culture and to the particular fan base of the Dreamscape. That was why he had severely underestimated the effect his recent visit to the amateur arena would have on the people interested in these things. He had only wanted to reach the number of victories required to access the professional duels as fast as possible, but failed to take into account how outstanding the feat of defeating 70 opponents in just 1 hour would look from the side. Especially considering the fact that he had killed the last half dozen or so with his bare hands, not even bothering to use a weapon. These last few duels looked especially striking, impressive, and gruesome. If before people called Mongrel a sword demon, now he had become just a demon in their eyes. What's worse, even though it took all of his power and lots of effort for Sonny to achieve these victories, due to the fact that his face was always hidden behind the fearsome mask, he appeared to be completely calm and indifferent, as if defeating so many people in a row was nothing to him, a walk in the park. Added to the fact that he had dismissed his sword near the end of the hour and then left after shaking his head, It seemed as though Mongrel was not only a demon, but also held all the rest of the duelists in utter contempt. Mongrel was disappointed in them. That disappointment ignited a fire in the hearts of many duelists of the dreamscape, pushing them to train harder, reach higher, and become stronger. Mongrel's status was always in front of them, reminding these young men and women what they were striving to achieve. Mongrel. Victories, 100. Defeats, 0. And of course, all of them continued to wonder about his true identity. Very soon, someone made a logical connection. An incredibly talented young warrior appeared in the dreamscape soon after 100 survivors of the Forgotten Shore returned to the real world, putting every awakened there to shame. Obviously, Mongrel was one of these 100 heroes. But which one? It didn't take people a lot of time to solve the mystery. On one of the discussion boards on the network, an anonymous user wrote, "Guys, isn't it obvious who is among the best of the Forgotten Shore warriors, and also has a big reason to keep his identity secret?" Another answered, Wait, you're right. It was right in front of us the whole time." And then the shocking piece of news spread through the network as wildfire. Mongrel's true identity is Kai of Nightingale. Nightingale Representative Agency publishes an official statement. Popular idol and fashion icon Knight is not the controversial dreamscape sensation, nor has he ever participated in any scandalous activities under the alias Mongrel. Sunny read the latest news title on the screen of his communicator and covered his face with his hand. Oh, gods! How did poor Kai end up being involved in this mess? Had the whole world gone completely insane? He stared at the message icon at the bottom of the screen nervously, half expecting to receive an angry message from his friend. Or was it up to Sunny to apologize in advance? Kai had seen him purchasing the mantle of the underworld after all. Even though the onyx armor did not look the same as it had before being repaired and turning from pure stone to the strange stone-like metal, there was a possibility that he would recognize it. Oh, why is life so hard? Sunny shook his head resentfully and stared at the ceiling. And then there was the issue of Rain. Sunny had watched her walk home through the eyes of the shadow and was once again consumed by uncertainty. Did he need to intervene? What was the best way to help her? Did she even require his help? There was no easy answer to any of these questions. He turned off the communicator, sat in the darkness for a while, then stood up and went to the kitchen. Retrieving all the things that could spoil quickly from the ruined refrigerator, Sunny cooked himself a decadent dinner and ate in tense silence. To hell with this. I'll deal with all these problems after returning from Shipwreck Island. It shouldn't take me that long to reach it, investigate, and come back anyway. A week at the most. Why waste time on all this nonsense when there was a treasure waiting for him in the dream realm? Sunny had already retrieved all the pertinent information he could find from the Academy database. All Awakened had some level of access to the base of shared knowledge about the dream realm and the nightmare creatures, and due to his position as the research assistant assigned to the Wilderness Survival faculty, he had more than most. It wasn't really enough to venture on such a dangerous expedition, but at least gave him a basic understanding of what to expect. The rest, he was going to have to learn from the people in the sanctuary who had actual experience of traversing those parts of the Chained Isles. And then, there was also Cassia. She could help him even more. With a dark grimace, Sunny washed the plates, spent a few moments admiring their design and craftsmanship, then went about preparing himself for a long stay in the dream realm. Soon, he entered the basement, activated the maximum level of security measures, and climbed into the steel coffin of the sleeping pod. As the lid of the sarcophagus closed, he sighed and thought,
1 week. I bet everyone will forget about all this mongrel idiocy in a week.
His gloomy shadow dejectedly shook its head. It took Sonny a whole day to talk to everyone he needed to talk to and gather enough information about the shipwreck island and the routes he could take to reach it. As it turned out, the journey promised to be even more perilous than he had expected. Awakened did not usually go that far into the wilderness of the Chained Isles alone, and even established cohorts were reluctant to venture this close to the tear. The nightmare creatures out there were ferocious and powerful, and the islands themselves presented more danger than here on the edges of the region. Those people did not have his aspect, though. Sonny did not consider himself to be more powerful than a full cohort of experienced Awakened would be, but his powers were tailored perfectly for scouting, traversal, and escape. Even if he was going to find himself facing an overwhelming foe, he was reasonably certain of his ability to at least run away. Plus, he had Saint. The taciturn demon was worth half a cohort alone and by herself. As the sun was crawling down from the heights of the sky above, he found himself in his room, studying the makeshift map of the Chained Isles. On it, Sonny had marked the potential routes to the Shipwreck Isles, as well as known dangers he would face on the way. Of course, such a map was not completely reliable. Nightmare creatures tended to migrate and travel between islands to escape the crushing, but the really terrifying ones tended to stay put. Even taking into account that some of the places he wanted to go through could turn out to be inaccessible due to entering the ascent phase, Sonny was more or less sure that he could reach the Shipwreck Island in 3 to 4 days, while remaining comparatively safe. With one exception. No matter how he looked at it, he was going to have to traverse an island known among the inhabitants of the sanctuary as the Reckoning. Not much was known about that place, except for the fact that several cohorts lost members there, while others had not come back at all. Apparently, the creature that inhabited the island was especially twisted and deadly, and was capable of messing with a person's sight. No one really knew what it was. However, all that Sonny was able to find out was that the creature was most likely not corrupted. People were under the impression that it was of the fallen rank, but had different opinions on what its class was exactly. It didn't seem to be a tyrant, at least.
I can fight perfectly well even if it plays tricks with my sight. And it's not like I have to defeat it, or even fight it, really. I can just slip past and be on my way.
With a sigh, he rolled the map up and placed it in his pack. There was already a bit of food and a few supplies for a prolonged journey there. Sonny couldn't take too much with him, since there was a rather small limit on the weight of things he could pull with himself into the shadows. He could also only do so with inanimate objects, at least for now. He had no idea if that was going to change in the future. Finally, he opened his chest and took out the fang he had retrieved from the dead chainworm on the Iron Hand Island. Sonny stared at the fang for a long time, a dark expression on his face. Cassia was going to visit the sanctuary soon. With this thing and her affinity to revelations, Sonny could make his expedition much safer, not to mention increase his chances of actually discovering the treasure. Or he could avoid having to ask her for help and take much more risk, with no guarantee of success. After a while, Sonny threw the fang back into the chest and closed the lid.
I'd rather die, honestly.
With a grim smile, he locked the chest, picked up his pack, and headed to the exit. As the sun rolled into the dark embrace of the sky below and disappeared, He left the safety of the sanctuary behind, approached the edge of the island, and jumped toward one of the heavenly chains. Sonny traveled northwest, trying to cover as much distance during the night as he could. He rushed across gargantuan chains as a swift shadow, soared up onto the island, traversed them on foot, and dove into the darkness once he reached the other side. He was moving across the chained isles with enviable speed, but still not as fast as someone capable of flight would. Using Shadow Step expended a lot of shadow essence, so he had to replenish it often to continue riding the heavenly chains. That, however, put him in a lot of danger. The islands were teeming with nightmare creatures of all kinds, as well as deadly natural, well, unnatural, really, threats. Sonny had to remain cautious at all times, keeping one shadow wrapped around his body while the other scouted ahead. He hid in the shadows to avoid fighting with wandering abominations, or, if there was no other choice, teleported away. These jumps, however, only served to devour more of his essence, forcing him to rest and circulate it through the coils of the soul serpent as he waited for his cores to fill up. Most of the time, he didn't feel like there was a real threat to his life. Sonny's combination of attributes and abilities made him a very hard prey to hunt. No matter what kind of horror tried, he always managed to slip away, for now at least. As long as he did not venture into the territory of the really terrifying nightmare creatures, like those corrupted fiends that claimed some of the islands, or the beings that dwelled on the dark side of the chained isles, he was going to be all right, as long as he managed his essence carefully. Against those powerful abominations, though, even being a shadow was not a guarantee of safety. He still remembered the two ghostly torches in the dungeon beneath the ruined cathedral in the Dark City. On his way, Sonny visited many islands that he had already explored before, and some that he never had a reason to visit. Each was lethal in its own way, and hid alluring mysteries, most of which were bound to turn out to be nothing but inescapable traps, of course. He suppressed his curiosity and moved past. With two skies full of bright stars, the chained isles were stunning at night. Even while rushing forward and hiding from the abominations populating this breathtaking and terrible land, Sonny couldn't help but marvel at its dark beauty. But beautiful things were the most dangerous. By now, he had learned that lesson all too well. At dawn, Sonny finally reached the island that was supposed to be the first stop on his journey. It was a desolate place where nothing lived, with rocky ground and plenty of small impact craters that had been left behind by the debris on the neighboring island. The chains holding that island in place had broken once, a long time ago. As a result, not restrained by anything, it soared high into the sky and eventually fell apart, ripped to pieces by the crushing. Its remaining neighbor was not of any particular use to Sonny, but it was a good place as any to rest and catch his breath. Hiding in one of the craters, Sonny ate a small breakfast of dried meat and cheese and drank from the endless spring. Then, he looked at the rising sun, studied his map for a few minutes, and summoned the saint. As the taciturn demon stepped out of his shadow, at enough of a distance to not subject him to the soul-eroding effect of the broken oath, of course, Sonny glanced at her, tiredly rubbed his face, and said,
I am going to sleep. You stand watch, please.
The shadow stared at him indifferently for a second, then knocked an arrow on the string of her bow and turned away. Sonny sighed.
I guess that means yes?
He could do without sleep for a couple more days, but it was wise to keep himself in the best possible shape, and wise to rest and sleep when he could. Using his pack as a pillow, Sonny laid down and closed his eyes. As his eyelids dropped, His thoughts lingered on how this was the only way he could sleep in the way he used to, without a pod, or without a worry of being swept away into another realm.
Just a few hours.
A day later, he reached the Reckoning. The ominous island that so many people in the sanctuary dreaded was large, spanning no less than a dozen kilometers across. What's worse, it was supported by only 2 chains, which were situated almost exactly opposite of each other. To get to the next one, Sonny had no choice but to travel the whole length of the island. There was grass covering the ground, with a forest of tall evergreen trees visible in the distance. He could see a rocky hill far away, with a waterfall rushing from a weathered cliff. Just like everywhere on the Chained Isles, it was unclear where the water came from and where it went. Sonny was already used to the strangeness of this land to pay it any attention. The Reckoning seemed like a beautiful and tranquil place, idyllic even. However, looking at it through the eyes of the shadow, Sonny couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something was very wrong with this place. It was very picturesque. However, he couldn't see or hear any living beings on the island. There was no sound other than the rustle of the wind, no movement other than the slow swaying of the trees. There were no beasts, no insects, no anything. Not a single nightmare creature could be seen wandering the expanse of the peaceful island. What could be so terrible that even nightmare creatures did not dare to come to this place? Or had they been slaughtered by the owner of the island? If so, where were the bones? Or bone dust, at least?
I don't like this.
Initially, Sonny thought of traversing the Reckoning in his usual manner, on foot. But now, he changed his mind. It was better to waste an additional amount of shadow essence than to risk meeting the ruler of this ominous place face to face, if it had a face. With a frown, Sonny used Shadow Step to leave the heavenly chain and appear on the surface of the island, near the shadow he had sent to take a look at it. Sonny did not assume physical form, preferring to remain incorporeal. That way, he would be able to reach the other side of the Reckoning unseen.
Where is that terrible creature anyway?
He couldn't see any hint of it anywhere. Full of grim apprehension, he slowly moved through the deep shadows that were cast by the tall trees of the evergreen forest. No matter how hard Sonny looked, he didn't notice any movement near him. It was as though the fallen abomination that gave this island its name, Reckoning, had simply disappeared.
Maybe it can't be seen.
Sonny cut off his vision and concentrated on the shadow sense. His perception of shadows came into focus, reaching far and wide. There was something in the distance.
What was that?
There was one shadow in particular that didn't belong to anything, approaching him with terrible speed.
The bastard is invisible.
Sonny froze, becoming absolutely still. In this state, he was not only one of the shadows, but also indistinguishable from the larger shadow he was hiding in. He didn't possess a physical body, so nothing was supposed to be able to hurt him in that state. At least, not physically. The invisible creature continued to move in his direction, even faster than before.
Wait, no. Something doesn't make sense.
Even if the abomination was invisible, why was there no sound? Why didn't grass bend beneath its feet? It was almost as if the nightmare creature that dwelt on the Reckoning was, really, a shadow. Before Sonny could react, the owner of the Reckoning was upon him. And then, he learned that shadows, too, could feel pain.
Sonny had never fought in a shadow form, and really, he didn't even know how. All he had were his instincts, but that wasn't enough. Trusting your instincts too much was a sure way to get yourself killed. Intelligence was the most dangerous weapon in the arsenal of a human, and it was Sonny's mind that ended up saving his life. He had realized that his enemy was not invisible, but a shadow, just like him, only a moment before the creature was upon him. In that split second, Sonny managed to come up with the only way to escape death. As sharp pain pierced his entire being, he lunged forward and escaped the shadows, rolling away on the grass. Jumping to his feet, Sonny staggered and clutched at his side, blood flowing between his fingers. Ah! The shadow of the unknown abomination lunged in pursuit and swiped uselessly across his body, not causing him any harm. It was just a shadow after all. And now, that shadow was swiping at flesh and bone. Throwing a glance at the thin tear in the puppeteer's shroud and the deep wound beneath it, Sonny took a step back. Simultaneously, he gave his shadows a command to hide themselves under his armor and augment his body. Physical attacks couldn't harm shadows, but shadows also had no way to harm living beings. That was the thought that had saved him. If he had failed to assume the shape of a human in time, he would have been dead by now, most likely. Because he had not remained a shadow, however, he and the shadow creature were now at a standstill. A curious thought scuttled across Sonny's mind at that moment.
But then, if the reckoning was only a shadow, did its mere presence keep other creatures at bay?
He shook that thought away as the shadow creature lunged at him again. The master of the Reckoning Island tried to attack him several more times, each strike ending up as fruitless as the previous ones. Then, it froze, as if slightly confused by the situation. Sonny finally had a chance to take a good look at the hostile shadow. It looked just like a shadow would, like a dark, ethereal silhouette of a person painted on the grass in black. The creature seemed to have 2 legs, 2 hands, and 1 head. If Sonny didn't know what it really was, he would have assumed that the shadow was cast by an ordinary person. There was no one else in sight, though. Backing away and grimacing because of the pain radiating from the deep wound in his side, Sonny stared at the enemy and thought feverishly,
No, this is wrong.
A shadow creature was, indeed, deadly for someone like him. But to every other human on the Chained Isles, it was completely harmless. How was it then that so many people had been killed by it? And what about the nightmare creatures? How had the shadow slaughtered so many living beings? His eyes widened slightly. Sonny threw his hand to the side to summon the Midnight Shard, and just in time. What happened next caused him to shudder. The creature moved once again, and then 2 dark flames appeared in its darkness. A moment later, a human figure stepped out of the shadow. It was a young man with pale skin and the cold, cruel eyes of an experienced killer. A spark of madness burned in their depths. The stranger had black hair and was wearing a light armor made out of soft silk and black, lusterless leather. In his hands, the apparition was holding a long, slightly curved blade of an austere tachi. Sonny felt fear grip his heart as he recognized the face in front of him. Of course he recognized it. It was his own face after all. Looking at the Devil of Reckoning was like looking into a mirror.
That's... Since when was I so scary?
Sonny recoiled in shock.
What the hell are you?
The apparition mimicked his expression, then opened its mouth. Its lips moved. However, there was no sound, as if the abomination was mute. Sonny had no problem reading its lips, though.
What the hell are you?
Sonny took a step back.
What is going on?
He thought. Before he could finish that thought, though, he had to defend himself against a lightning-fast strike of the enemy's sword. Sonny deflected the fearsome attack and staggered back, his hands trembling from the force of the impact.
Curses!
The bastard might have looked like Sonny, but it was much, much stronger. About as strong as a fallen devil would probably be. Sonny had no time to recover before his evil twin was upon him once again, attacking with the painfully familiar grace of his own battle style. This time, the tip of the tachi missed Sonny's eyes only by a few centimeters. A vicious smile appeared on the apparition's face. Sonny grunted. As the abomination launched a flurry of lethal attacks his way, each swift and vicious, he struggled to defend himself and fought through the pain. He was barely holding on, for now at least. Because of how strong and fast the creature was, Sonny had no doubt that he would be killed eventually. How could he fight against someone who knew all his tricks, but was also much more powerful? Even the shadow dance was useless. What was the point in trying to mirror the style of an opponent who had stolen his technique from Sonny himself? The situation did not look good at all. Especially because blood was still streaming down Sonny's torso. Between two strikes, he dashed back and pierced the apparition with a furious gaze.
You poor bastard. Of all the faces out there, you just had to choose mine? Fool. Couldn't you have chosen someone, I don't know, taller?
Internally, though, he couldn't help but think,
not gonna lie, the evil version of me looks sort of awesome. Am I really this dashing in real life?
Sonny didn't really know how to feel about this. He wasn't, of course, trying to speak to the creature because he wanted to chat. He was just trying to distract it. Well, the saint was drawing her bow. A moment later, a black arrow whistled into the air, aimed at the devil's heart. However, the young man with cruel dark eyes simply stepped to the side and swiped the arrow away with his sword. Sonny cursed. His disappointment turned to abject horror, though, only a moment later, when a sudden ripple spread through the bizarre creature's body. In the blink of an eye, the apparition changed. Its face suddenly became white as alabaster and inhumanly beautiful, with ruby eyes, high cheekbones, and full lips. The soft fabric of its armor turned black as onyx and hard as stone. The shape and height of its body changed too. Before Sonny could even react, he wasn't facing his own reflection anymore. Instead, he was facing the saints.
Shit.
As the sickening feeling of his soul slowly falling apart permeated Sonny's entire being, the perfect copy of the taciturn demon raised its bow and sent an arrow flying straight at his heart.
Well, one mystery is solved at least.
Sonny became painfully aware of how the Devil of the Reckoning was able to slaughter so many awakened, and why no nightmare creature could survive on its island. If the bastard was able to turn into a copy of any enemy while remaining as powerful as a fallen devil, then very few things could ever hope to escape from it alive. And those awakened who had escaped, despite everything, mistakenly believed that their companions fell to a creature that could mess with people's sight. What else would they think after watching a human being killed by what looked like their exact copy? Well, why had no one thought that it was an actual copy and not a trick of the eye, damn it? If there was one thing that landed Sonny in this dire situation, it was that people in the sanctuary severely lacked imagination. All these thoughts flashed through his mind as he used Shadow Step to disappear and fall awkwardly to the ground a dozen meters behind the devil, completely out of the way of the flying arrow.
Great. But now what?
Just a few moments before, Sonny had been contemplating abandoning the fight and simply running away. Unlike some humans he had met in the past, he wasn't burdened by useless things like pride or vanity. If the situation called for a cowardly escape, he was ready and willing to do just that. But now that the bastard had turned into the saint and was holding a bow, the idea of trying to run was not very enticing. The last thing he wanted was to be hit in the back of his head by an arrow.
Think.
There was no time to think, though. The reflection of the saint swiftly spun and lunged toward him. As Sonny teleported further away, the creature suddenly pivoted and crashed into the trunk of a tall ancient tree. A moment later, Sonny emerged from the shadows and saw, with horror, a giant mass of heavy wood plummeting on him from above. Desperately burning through his essence, he filled his body with as much strength as possible and raised his hands, trying to catch the falling tree. As a groan escaped from his mouth, Sonny's feet dug into the soft soil of the Reckoning Island. Somehow, he managed to stop the tree without being crushed by it. It was at this moment that a second arrow flashed toward his heart, only to collide with another one in the air and fly aside. Some distance away, the real saint dismissed the bow, raised her sword, and dashed toward the imposter.
Eat that, bastard!
Sonny gritted his teeth, strained his already overtaxed muscles, and threw the massive tree at the abomination with a tremendously powerful push. When he used his essence and augmented his body with both shadows, Sonny was able to achieve bursts of truly inhuman strength. How was the bastard going to escape this? The creature indifferently lowered its shoulder, then simply disappeared into the shadows and appeared on the other side of the flying trunk. Then, it met attacking the real saint with a devastating shoulder bash. The onyx armor of the taciturn demon cracked, and she was thrown back, causing another tree to explode in a cloud of splinters. Sonny paled.
Shadow step? It can shadow step? Not good.
The apparition turned to him and mockingly tilted its head. Something was very wrong with that thing. It seemed maleficent and utterly mad, but at the same time, incomplete somehow. Behind the evil will and terrifying killing intent that dwelled in its ruby eyes, there was a hint of some other boundless emotion. Sonny faintly recognized the feeling of it, since he had felt the same deep and indescribable emotion one time before. Far below the hollow mountains and the darkness of the misty stone labyrinth between two otherworldly rivers, he had sensed the same feeling of loss, anguish, and confusion in the shadows left behind by the companions of the First Lord of the Bright Castle.
What even is that thing?
He had no time to ponder about its nature, though, because the creature had once again turned into a pale young man with dark eyes and was lunging at him, a vicious smile frozen on its lips. Feeling a cold shiver run down his spine, Sonny realized that he would not win this fight, nor was he capable of escaping from the reckoning alive. This time, he was truly in danger. He was really going to die on this beautiful, peaceful island, and the last thing he was going to see before falling into the embrace of death would be his own reflection staring back at him through the eyes of his killer. Unless... Sonny sent the saint back into the Soul Sea and met the apparition's attack with a block, feeling his body shudder from the force of the blow. He had assumed that the Devil of Reckoning was a shadow, and it was indeed similar to one at that time, but in reality, it was not a shadow. Not really. It only appeared as a shadow because Sonny himself had been in the form of a shadow when they first clashed. And once he had turned into a human, the devil, too, became a human. The young man with the cold eyes of a killer took a small step and made a high thrust with the tachi. Sonny, however, knew his one fighting style too well to be caught by that trap. Knowing that the thrust was just a feint, he threw his own blade downward and just barely managed to deflect a vicious slash that followed. He was late by a fraction of a second, though. Another tear appeared in the fabric of the puppeteer's shroud, and a shallow wound on his thigh began seeping with blood. The creature was a reflection of whatever it was fighting. It mirrored everything about its enemy: their appearance, their weapons, their battle technique, even their powers. Otherwise, how would it be able to use Shadow Step? In a sense, it was a perfect adversary. But that wasn't all. Sonny grimaced at the apparition, threw his sword away, and delivered a powerful kick that almost turned all of his ribs into bone dust. If not for the burst of essence he had sent to his legs, Sonny would have never managed to dodge that devastating blow. But his essence was already running dry, and his enemy seemed to be even stronger now, as if the more Sonny bled, the more powerful the pale young man became. The devil was even able to mirror the memories its enemy wielded. Before, Sonny had experienced the soul attack of the copy of the Broken Oath, and now the creature was obviously being fed raw power by the Blood Blossom. He attacked with the Midnight Shard to buy himself a couple of moments to think. The apparition had not seemed to be affected by the Broken Oath, though. Was that because it had assumed the form of Saint, who was immune to soul attacks? Did this mean that the devil was able to copy not only powers and memories, but attributes too? The creature easily deflected Sonny's attack and leaned forward to deliver the final blow. Sonny's only hope to escape it was to jump back. But what else did the creature copy? Was it really a perfect reflection? There was only one way to find out. Instead of jumping back, Sonny stepped forward and collided against the apparition, completely open, unable to escape being struck down by the enemy's blade. Before the deadly strike came, however, he leaned close to the devil's ear and whispered, so softly that no one except for the two of them would ever be able to hear what he had said.
Stop, lost from light. Stop, lost from light.
Sonny's heart was pounding in his chest. Time seemed to slow. No, not slow. It froze. Sonny stepped back and blinked. He looked at the creature before him that still wore his face and smiled. The devil froze as if suddenly turned to stone. It was a perfect reflection indeed. The apparition stood motionlessly, frozen in place by Sonny's quiet command. He could see the face reflecting in its dark eyes, even paler than usual. Beads of sweat glistening in the sun. The creature was completely still, all its terrifying strength shackled by the 4 simple words Sonny had whispered to it. It was enslaved. No matter how powerful the strange abomination was, no amount of power could ever allow it to disobey the command of its new master, Sonny. By stealing his face and his powers, the creature had also inherited his innate ability, Shadow Bond. Sonny had made use of that bond to subjugate the devil, and now it was at his mercy. For now, at least. Who knew how long this would last? How long he had before the creature took on another form that would not be held back by his own attributes and flaws? With a pained grimace, Sonny fell to the ground and drew in a hoarse breath. That was close. The wound on his thigh was not too serious, but the cut he had received as a shadow was long and deep. Bloodweave had prevented him from losing too much blood and was going to ensure a fast recovery, but even that had its limits. The wounds needed to be tended to, but they could wait a bit.
If he was going to travel back to the Citadel, he needed to regain some strength. And right now, Sonny had to decide what to do with the former ruler of this island, the Reckoning. The dreadful creature that had slain plenty of humans, and only gods know how many nightmare creatures, was now under his full control. Such a powerful abomination. It would surely be very helpful to have something that fearsome serving him, unable to disobey any command. He glanced at the frozen creature and shivered. Looking at it was still like looking in a mirror. Despite knowing that the thing in front of him was a nightmare creature, he couldn't help but see a slight young man with pale skin and dark eyes. He couldn't help but see himself. Yes, having a fallen devil do his bidding would be extremely beneficial, especially because the apparition looked exactly like him. With a bit of cunning and preparation, Sonny would be able to seemingly appear in two places at the same time. If he ever needed to prove that he wasn't a mongrel or accomplish something shady without drawing any suspicion, that would be a perfect way to do so. There were countless scenarios where such an ability would be incredibly useful. But there lay the problem. The creature was only enslaved because it had assumed his form. Since the creature could take any shape, it was going to stop possessing his aspect abilities, including Shadow Bond, as soon as it turned into something else. Then, it would be free of its shackles and able to do whatever it wanted, including unleashing its wrath on Sonny. That was why he had dismissed the saint before attempting to subjugate the apparition. He needed it to remain as his own reflection, and no one else's. Yes, he could circumvent the possibility of losing control over the terrifying creature with a long series of complex orders that would limit when and how it could use its shapeshifting. But coming up with a foolproof net of prohibitions was a Herculean task. Sonny wasn't even sure that it was possible. He had no idea how smart or cunning this creature was, if it could find loopholes quickly or not. If he did keep it to do his bidding, how long would Sonny have before it figured out how to break its bonds? A week? Months? Sonny had spent a long time thinking of ways to escape this exact fate. So he knew better than most, better than anyone perhaps, how hard it was to keep an unwilling slave under control, especially if the enslaved being was more powerful than its master. There would always be a way to twist words, find a loophole, and turn the orders given by the master against themselves. Sonny was sure of it. He had to be. He hoped he was right at least. The idea of facing only a future of possible enslavement was too heavy to bear. If she ever returned... No, Sonny shook his head. He could not let himself spiral into those thoughts. Not right now. Not when he did not know how much longer he would have peace. So, what was he supposed to do with the frozen abomination? Standing up with a grimace, Sonny faced his perfect copy and looked at it with regret. The main reason for what he was about to do, nevertheless, was way less complicated. He simply didn't want to be a slaver. He didn't want to own any living thing. Sonny lingered for a while, gazing at his curious reflection, and then spoke. Don't be scared. I won't make you a slave. That would be too cruel of a fate, don't you think? Even for a nightmare creature like you. With that, he raised his hand as if to caress the cheek of the pale young man, and then swiped it swiftly across his neck. Almost invisible in the bright light, the ghostly blade of the midnight shard trembled as drops of crimson blood fell from it into the vibrant grass. The young man didn't move, but his pupils widened. A few moments later, blood flowed from between his lips, painting his pale skin red. Sonny looked at the dying apparition
deeply disturbed by the visage in front of him. It was not every day that one got to see oneself die. That is... He paled slightly, but did not look away. That is deeply fucked up. In front of him, a person who looked exactly like himself was slowly drowning in blood, a crimson torrent flowing from his slit throat. A few moments later, when the creature was on death's doorstep, its body suddenly trembled. Then, it shifted slightly. A tortured smile appeared on its face. The apparition's lips moved, but just as before, no sound escaped from them. However, Sonny thought that he had managed to read a few words. "We never searching." That was what the apparition had tried to say, or something with those 3 words. Then, the light in its eyes extinguished. A strange ripple spread over the young man's body, and a moment later, thin cracks appeared on his skin. After a second or two, the creature shattered into a rain of silver glass, which then turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Only one jagged mirror shard remained lying in the grass, reflecting nothing but cold darkness. As Sonny stared at all this in bewilderment, the spell whispered,
"You have slain an ascended reflection, Mirror Beast."
Sonny blinked.
Wait, what did it just say? An ascended reflection? What the spell is that?
The spell, however, wasn't done speaking.
"You have received a memory."
Sonny stared at the ground, confused.
What just happened?
Why did the spell call that thing an ascended reflection? What was a reflection, and why was it ascended instead of fallen? How could a nightmare creature be ascended? He frowned.
Was it not a nightmare creature? How is that possible?
The apparition was definitely not a human. So, what else could it be if not one of the Dream Realm's abominations? And one more thing. The spell did not say that his shadow had grown stronger, did it? To make sure, Sonny checked the number of his shadow fragments. Just as he had suspected, it didn't change. He even dove into the Soul Sea and saw that there was no new shadow among the rows of the creatures he had slain.
This is very, very strange.
What the hell had he just killed? With a deep frown on his face, Sonny bent down and cautiously picked up the jagged mirror shard that the apparition had left behind. No matter how he looked at it, the shard resembled a perfectly mundane piece of glass with a thin layer of silver painted over its reverse side. The only strange thing about it was that no matter how Sonny turned the shard, it refused to reflect anything except for an impenetrable veil of darkness. There was also an inscription on its reverse. Sonny's frown deepened when he realized that the inscription was not made with runes. Instead, what he saw were the familiar letters of the human alphabet. They were clumsy and awkward, as if written by a child's hand. There was only one word written on the mirror shard. Beastie.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
The mystery of the mirror beast was so strange that for a time, Sonny even forgot about the burning pain in his side. Eventually, he whispered,
An echo?
Echoes did not possess souls, so he expected that slaying one would not reward him with any shadow fragments. Just like what had happened after Mirror Beast's death. The apparition, however,
was obviously not an echo. It was too independent, sentient, and had too much individuality to be a simple copy of a dead nightmare creature. Not to mention that it had been ruling the reckoning for the past few years, with no human master in sight. There was, however, a type of being that it resembled. Sonny threw a dark look at the remains of a tree that had been shattered by Saint's body. In many ways, the strange reflection resembled a shadow. Was the mere beast a type of echo created by someone's aspect? Its creator must have been incredibly powerful then. If so, where were they? What had happened to them? And why was their reflection wandering the chained aisles in a feral state? There were no answers. It was just a theory anyway. Sonny had no proof whatsoever to substantiate it. Maybe his new memory would give him some answers. He was about to summon the runes, but a sudden pulse of pain reminded him that he was, in fact, still wounded. With a hiss, Sonny clutched at his side and looked around, searching for shelter. He was going to have to tend to his wounds and rest after the fight with Mirrbeast. The memory could wait until after he wasn't bleeding so much. Wrapping the strange mirror shard in a piece of fabric and placing it into his pack, Sonny used some of his last remaining reserve of shadow essence to step through the shadows and appear near the rocky hill in the center of the island. His shadow had noticed a shallow cave there, which was situated, obviously, behind the foaming wall of the picturesque waterfall. Walking on a narrow stone ledge that led behind the waterfall, Sonny checked that the cave was empty, and then entered its cool shade. The cave wasn't very big, but due to its location and hidden nature, there was no better shelter on the entire island. Rather happy with this discovery, Sonny groaned and lowered himself to the ground. Sending Saint to keep watch outside, he dismissed the puppeteer's shroud, then opened his pack and took out a small box containing several thin needles and a span of silk thread. Staring at the needles with a deadpan expression, Sonny sighed.
I hate this part.
Due to his awakened body and the nature of Bloodweave, Sonny could recover from most injuries much faster than any mundane human, or even one of his peers would be able to. However, if he wanted to be able to travel again by tomorrow, he still had to take measures. With another sigh, he threaded one of the needles, gritted his teeth, and began suturing the edges of the long cut on his side together. The process was not very pleasant, to say the least, so the cave was full of the sounds of heavy breathing and suppressed curses for a while. Finally, Sonny was done. Washing the dried blood off his body with the help of the endless spring, he grimaced and looked around. Now that he had time to take a better look at the cave, he noticed that it had, apparently, been used as a shelter by another human at some point in the past. There was a circle of stones built to contain a fire, with a bunch of firewood arranged neatly by its side. By now, the wood had long rotten, letting Sonny know that the cave remained empty for many years. There was a pack, much like his own, laying on the cold stones near the fire pit. He limped toward it and took a look inside. There was nothing of particular interest there, just the usual supplies a traveling awakened would take with them on a long expedition, most of them ruined by the humidity inside the cave and the passage of time. He did, however, retrieve a rolled-up map and studied it for some time. The map had been drawn on a piece of monster hide, so the humid air did it no favors. Most of it was unreadable, with only a few small pieces remaining intact. Sonny judged that the person who had left it behind was much more knowledgeable about the Chained Isles than he was. Sadly, none of that knowledge had been preserved. The only legible word he could easily read was written near the edge of the tear, It read,
Hope?
Sonny sighed. The stranger whose map he was studying had most likely been killed by the mirror beast. For a moment, he entertained the idea that the map had actually been left behind by the creator of the strange reflection, but that theory made little sense. Why would such a powerful person leave not only his things, but also his creation behind? Putting the map back into the rotted pack, Sonny glanced at the fire pit and said after a long pause,
I'm sorry that your hopes had been for naught, whoever you were. Now, your nightmare is over.
With that, he hesitated for a few moments, and then finally summoned the runes. It was time to take a look at the memory he had received for slaying the terrifying creature that the spell had called the Mirror Beast. A few seconds later, Sonny's eyes widened.
Weapon! It's a weapon!
Sonny stared at the shimmering runes, excitement rising in his heart. This was what he had been waiting for.
Memory, cruel sight. Memory rank, ascended. Memory tier, 4. Memory type, weapon.
A weapon. Sonny had been searching for a new weapon for a long time. He was very fond of the Midnight Shard, since that was the sword he had carried through the darkest time of his life, and with which he had fought his way out of the hell of the Forgotten Shore. Despite his attachment, Sonny knew that his journey was far from over, and he needed a weapon that could better match his growing power and the increasingly dangerous challenges he faced. It was a very powerful memory, too, one whose enchantment had saved his life on several occasions. However, Sonny felt that he had outgrown the austere Tachi, or rather, the obstacles he was facing these days. Many of the nightmare creatures on the Chained Isles were of the fallen rank, and their tough hides presented a lot of resistance to the sharp blade of the awakened sword. Not to mention those corrupted horrors that Sonny avoided to the best of his ability, for now, but was inevitably bound to encounter one day. The other reason he wanted to procure a new weapon was the fact that the Unbroken enchantment, while extremely potent and useful, could only be accessed in very rare circumstances, namely, when Sonny was nearing death. This meant that the most powerful trait of the Midnight Shard could only help Sonny if he made a terrible mistake. If Sonny fought with skill and foresight, however, thus keeping himself from being mortally wounded, the powerful enchantment remained inactive, as it had for the past months. Paradoxically, the better Sonny performed, the less useful the Midnight Shard was to him. It was nice to have a last resort, but Sonny did not like the idea of relying on a tool that could only be effective if he failed. He wanted to possess a weapon whose enchantments were reliant on his success, and as such both strengthened him and rewarded him for doing well. Hopefully, this was one such weapon. It was an ascended memory of the 4th tier, equivalent to a memory he would have received from a fallen devil. That was already a tremendous start. His most powerful weapon right now, the Midnight Shard, had come from a mere fallen beast. Trying to control his expectations, Sonny trembled in anticipation and read further.
Memory description. Full of pride, the noble knight made a deal with the Dreamspawn. Years later, the knight had defeated all his enemies and became a mighty king. On the day that his son uttered the first word, the Dreamspawn came to the king and demanded his pay. He left the kingdom with the child and disappeared, never to be seen again. Much later, the young prince returned and stood beneath his father's throne. He expected to be met with joy and warmth, but was met with fear and suspicion instead.
Sonny frowned. What the hell does that mean? The description mentioned a dream spawn, or rather, the Dream Spawn. That was the name of an attribute Nephis had, which she possessed because of being born from a hollow mother. Were there other people with the same attribute among the human race? There had to be. And, judging by this strange tale, they had been feared even here in the Dream Realm. No, that didn't make any sense. Nephis was described as being born of two worlds, so how could a native of the Dream Realm possess the same attribute?
Very strange. Many of the names are just a coincidence.
Sunny shrugged, then concentrated on the runes.
Tell me what you can do.
Memory enchantments, Shapeshifter, Light Eater, Ghost Blade, Dark Mirror.
4 of them.
His eyes gleamed. Shapeshifter, enchantment description. This weapon can shift form between a sword and a spear. Sunny hesitated for a moment, contemplating what he'd just heard, then turned away from the runes and summoned the cruel sight. He just had to see this. A tenumbrous mist shrouded his hand, and then an elegant sword appeared in it. It was much shorter than the Midnight Shard, with a leaf-shaped blade that was about as long as the distance between Sunny's elbow and the tip of his middle finger. The blade seemed to be forged out of polished silver and served as a perfectly clear mirror. Looking into it, Sunny could see the reflection of his pale face and the wall of the cave behind him. The hilt of the short sword was made out of polished black wood, which was encased in intricately engraved silver near the guard and at the pommel. The cruel sight was light and swift. Sunny slashed the air several times and smiled. It was going to take some time to get used to using a single-handed sword, but he liked it. It already felt like an extension of his hand. It was much more suited for stealth attacks, too. The sword was also double-edged, which gave him more freedom in how to use it. But that wasn't all. Following a mental command, the hilt of the sword suddenly began to extend. A second later, Sunny was holding a long, graceful spear. The black shaft contrasted against the silver blade, creating a beautiful and somber image. The blade itself kept its length, so Sunny could perform not only thrusting attacks, but also cuts and slashes. He stared at the somber, elegant spear for a bit, then commanded it to turn back into the sword. This was going to be a challenge. Sunny wasn't really proficient with polearms, but he had seen how versatile, unpredictable, and deadly they could be in the hands of a master. Not to mention that he had wished to have more distance between himself and the nightmare creatures he fought on numerous occasions. This weapon was a perfect combination of mobility and reach, allowing him to effortlessly switch between a nimble short sword and a devastating long spear. It gave him access to the best of both worlds. His smile widened.
Perfect. This is perfect.
What else could it do? There were 3 enchantments left. Light Eater. Enchantment description. The blade of this weapon can reflect, absorb, and expel light. That would be useful to control shadows, as well as potentially blinding the opponents. Ghost Blade. Enchantment description. This weapon can strike at incorporeal targets. An incredible ability that would give Sunny the ability to fight against some of the most dangerous creatures in the Dream Realm. Those wraiths that were immune to physical damage. Dark Mirror. Enchantment description. Each attack of this weapon can be augmented with elemental damage. It can be charged with any element the wielder has been damaged by. Current charge, none.
Oh,
Sonny gasped.
a permanent elemental augmentation? This is incredible!
Sonny stared at the emptiness for some time, thinking. His new weapon was an ascended one of the 4th rank, which already made it much more formidable than anything else in his arsenal. It was adamantine and sharp as a razor, which would allow him to cut through fallen creatures as if they were made of butter. Well, not exactly, but rather close. Added to that was the considerable reach of its spear form and the incredible swiftness of its sword form. But there was more. The cruel sight was capable of augmenting its attacks with elemental damage. That meant that each wound Sonny would deliver to his enemies would be more deadly. Not only that, but the nature of the augmentation could be changed, which meant that if given enough time to prepare, he would be able to exploit the weaknesses of his opponents with the element they were most vulnerable to. He just had to get himself wounded by that same element.
Ouch. Okay, that's a bit less enticing.
Everything that was worth it had to hurt a little. Sonny had learned it many years ago. Speaking of which, he sighed, then summoned the cruel sight and held it in his hands for a bit. Then he stood up and walked toward the exit from the cave. As the sound of the waterfall grew louder and louder, he prepared himself. A second later, Sonny entered the field of soul erosion emanated from Saint's armor. Instantly, he felt weak and in pain, as though the very essence of his self was being dissolved by a terrible force.
Ah, curses!
No matter how many times he was subjected to the effect of the broken oath, it was a vile feeling every time. The only good thing about it was that souls, just like bodies, could heal with time. And as long as he did not spend too much time being damaged by that evil memory, he would be able to recover in a day or two. Gritting his teeth, Sonny summoned the runes describing the cruel sight and simultaneously sent essence into the memory's silver blade, activating the dark mirror enchantment. As his contorted face reflected in the polished silver of the elegant sword, nothing about it changed. However, the cruel sight suddenly seemed different, as if an invisible, cold, sharp aura surrounded its edges. Sonny looked at the description of the dark mirror. Current charge, soul. With a relieved sigh, he took a few steps back and escaped the radius of the broken oath. The sensation of his soul being slowly destroyed swiftly disappeared. He rolled his shoulders trying to shake off the feeling, but the pain lingered. The runes, however, did not change. Sonny had to feed the memory with a small amount of shadow essence to activate the augmenting enchantment, but its blade would remain entwined with the element of his choice until he charged it with another. A cruel smile appeared on his lips. Just like that, Sonny now possessed a weapon capable of dealing soul damage, the rarest and most insidious type of damage he knew of, one that very few beings out there had any resistance to. In the span of one day, his lethality had grown tenfold. Dismissing the somber sword, Sonny turned around and walked back into the cave.
I guess I am the true harbinger of reckoning now.
His gloomy shadow lingered for a bit, then scratched the back of its head. For once, it had nothing to add. Sonny eyed the shadow wearily, hoping its silence wasn't a bad omen. 2 days later, Sonny had finally fully recovered. Sonny was finally approaching Shipwreck Island. Currently, he was on the neighboring one, hiding in the shadow of a collapsed stone tower that had long ago become overgrown with moss. Somewhere behind him,
The body of a giant worm-like creature lay on the ground, its body seeping foul black blood into the dirt. Sonny had spent a lot of essence jumping through shadows to avoid being devoured by that thing. No matter how many times he had pierced its flesh with his spear, the worm seemed to possess an almost endless amount of vitality. The fact that Sonny had no idea where any of the abomination's vital organs were only made the situation worse. In the end, however, the nightmare creature succumbed to the damage being continuously dealt to its soul, and now it lay dead at his feet. Swarms of smaller but no less repulsive worms were already emerging from the ground to feast on its flesh. Sonny did not care. He had already retrieved the soul shard from the creature's body, and he surely had no plans of using the worm's meat as food. He briefly wondered if the smaller worms ate iron as well. They didn't seem to want anything but the fresh meat before them. He supposed that was for the better. The thoughts left his mind as his attention shifted back to where he was looking. He was no longer looking at his latest kill, but instead looking up, high above the island he stood on. His concentration was high up in the crushing sky. The shipwreck island was currently at the height of its ascent phase and loomed high above in the sky. As a result, Sonny was able to see its underbelly, far away in the distance.
What the hell?
The downside of the island was shrouded in eternal shadow, and something vast and terrifying was moving in it. The inhabitants of the dark side were all powerful and unsightly, but the thing nesting under that one in particular was especially harrowing. Perhaps all islands this close to the tear sheltered such horrors, but even that was not the thing Sonny was looking at.
I guess I have my answer.
A long time ago, one of the chains connected to Shipwreck Island had broken and now hung down. Entangled in it, a giant iron corpse swayed slowly in the wind. The creature resembled a man made entirely out of metal. The heavenly chain had coiled around one of his legs, so the giant hung with his head down, his face rusted and severely damaged. His powerful chest was caved in and shattered by some titanic blow, and one of his arms was torn away at the shoulder. This was, without a doubt, the creature whose lost limb gave the name to the Iron Hand Island. The dead giant swayed despondently in the wind, producing sounds of rusty metal scraping against the iron of the heavenly chain. Those sounds were loud enough to reach across the gap between the two islands and be heard by Sonny in his hiding place. Looking at that humbling sight, Sonny shivered.
Who could have killed such a thing?
Of course, there was no way to know for sure. Just like always, finding one answer immediately presented Sonny with a dozen new questions. Questions he wasn't sure he wanted an answer to. Nervously shifting his gaze between the hanged giant and the swarm of worms ravenously devouring their elder, Sonny remained hidden in the shadows and waited. The rattling of chains announced that the shipwreck island was starting to descend. Sonny tensed.
It's time.
The chain leading to the shipwreck island was about 2.5 miles long, which was on the shorter side by the Chained Isles standards. As a swift shadow, Sonny would have been able to ride it all the way to his destination in just a few minutes. Sadly, the heavenly chain was currently drawn taut and nowhere near the sky below, which meant that its links weren't covered by a thick layer of shadows. He was going to have to cross it on foot. As the ground behind him started to move, announcing the approach of something far more hungry and terrifying than the swarm of gluttonous maggots, Sonny slid out of his hiding spot, dashed toward the edge of the island, and jumped down. Falling through the vast expanse of the blue sky, he landed on the iron surface of the heavenly chain, rolled down a few meters, and then finally caught his balance. The chain stretched far into the distance, rising higher and higher until it connected with the slowly descending Shipwreck Island. Unlike how it was with the other pieces of land Sonny had seen in this strange region of the Dream Realm, the chain didn't simply disappear into the soil, but instead led to a tall stone structure that resembled a castle gate. Two massive pillars rose high into the sky, overgrown by vines and moss. The gate itself had been broken a long time ago, and now the space between the pillars was empty, the wind passing freely through its vast opening. It seemed too perilous and fragile, even more so now that he saw it so close, saw the decaying reality. Further away, the corpse of the Iron Giant continued to sway in the air, his one remaining hand pointed at the sky below. Summoning the cruel sight, Sonny turned it into the spear and cautiously moved forward. The further he walked, the lower the Shipwreck Island descended, until finally the heavenly chain became almost horizontal. In about an hour, Sonny crossed the abyss separating two isles and approached the stone structure he had noticed from afar. Up close, it was even more monumental. He found out that he had been wrong, though. The pillars did not seem like they had ever served to house a massive gate. Instead, they just reached for the sky, built for some unknown purpose. There were weathered steps cut into each of the pillars, leading all the way to the top. Sonny frowned.
Who would be crazy enough to climb that high?
He wondered. Even now that the island had descended, up there on top of the monumental pillars, the crushing must have been suffocating. It looked high enough that he wondered if it could even be escaped. With a shrug, he used the dark wing to glide upward and climbed onto a wide stone platform between the pillars. As soon as he was sure it was out of reach of the crushing, his shoulders relaxed a bit. From here, the remains of an ancient road led further into the island. Following it to reach the top of a low hill, Sonny stopped and looked down at the site of the peculiar landmark that gave this place its name. At the very heart of the desolate island, a large wooden ship lay broken on the ground. It must have been beautiful and magnificent once, but now, all that remained of its former glory were the fluid lines of the graceful and narrow hull. The ancient wood somehow remained untouched by the passage of time, but the bow of the ship was completely shattered. There were also large breaches here and there along the length of the wreck, and green vines covering large sections of it. What was a ship doing at the heart of a land that had no rivers and no seas remained a mystery. But Sonny became hypnotized by the sight of a crushed vessel for a completely different reason. A triumphant spark appeared in his eyes.
I guess I am in luck today.
With a dark smile, he shifted his gaze and looked at the tall mast of the ship. A dead, withered tree coiled around it, its naked branches stretching into the sky like bones. Sonny recognized that tree, even if it looked very different from how it was depicted on the reverse side of the mysterious coins, full of life and in bloom. This was the same ship he had seen before, which meant that the coin might have come from inside the wreck, or at least was connected to it somehow. Initially, Sonny had only planned to scout the vicinity of the island and search for the traces left by the dead chainworm. But now, he felt as if this scouting expedition could actually lead him directly to the treasure he so desperately wanted to find. What were the chances that the coins depicting the strange ship came from somewhere else? Close to zero, most likely. This had to be the place. Now, he only had to sneak into the wreck, explore it,
and return in one piece. Which was not an easy task, considering how close to the tear the island was. Sonny could not see any nightmare creatures moving across its surface, but he knew that there had to be some, and that they were going to be of the truly dreadful kind. Still, he wasn't going to turn back now. It's worth it. He rolled back his shoulders and pressed on. Sonny spent some time observing the island. No matter how hard he looked and how much his shadows roamed around, he couldn't see any abominations anywhere near the ancient ship. That didn't mean they were not there, though. It just meant that they were better at hiding than he was at looking. After a while, Sonny frowned and summoned Saint. The taciturn demon stepped out of his shadow a few 100 meters down the slope of the hill and indifferently looked around. Then, she dismissed her bow and instead summoned a melee weapon. The midnight shard appeared in her hands, its austere blade reflecting the black onyx of the Shadow's armor. The two suited each other very well. Saint turned her back to Sonny, raised the long tachi, and calmly headed toward the distant wreck. After 30 seconds or so, he left his shelter and followed, keeping to the shadows. Minute after minute passed in tense silence. Despite his expectations, they didn't meet any powerful abominations. The island was quiet and deserted, covered only by overgrown ruins, vines, and piles of broken wood. When they were halfway to the ship, however, something finally changed. As Saint approached one of the piles of debris, it suddenly moved, and then assembled itself into the shape of a tall, menacing humanoid creature, its hands ending in long, jagged blades. As countless similar pieces of splintered wood began to move all around them, Sonny breathed out a curse. It had started so well. Damnation! Before the first wood wraith could even fully form, the Saint was already upon it. The blade of the midnight shard flashed through the air and bit into the body of the creature with the dull sound of an axe striking the bark of a tree. The effect was somewhat the same. Although she managed to do some damage, the wraith simply ignored the shallow cut and lurched forward, towering above the graceful stone knight with destructive menace. Its hands fell down with crushing force, the wooden blades aimed at the Saint's helmet. Wood can't cut stone, right? Sonny barely had time to think before this was nearly put to the test. The Saint seemed reluctant to test that theory. Instead, she easily sidestepped the creature's attack and thrust upward, driving the tip of the midnight shard into the enemy's neck. Augmented by one of Sonny's shadows, the sword went deep into the adamantine wood. A moment later, the second shadow wrapped itself around the body of the taciturn demon, causing her skin to shine with dark radiance. The coral gem of the broken oath glowed brightly on her black breastplate. The Saint twisted her blade and pushed it sideways, causing half of the wood wraith's neck to explode into a rain of splinters. The creature staggered and lashed out with another strike, but it was too late. The shadow calmly shifted her weight from one leg to another and delivered a devastating slash, beheading her enemy. As the wraith fell apart and turned back into a pile of debris, the Saint looked at it indifferently, and then hit the dull side of the midnight shard's blade against her shoulder twice. The voice of the spell whispered, "You have slain a fallen beast, Sailor Doll. Your shadow grows stronger." Sonny gritted his teeth. He didn't have time to celebrate. Shit! Augmented by two shadows, Saint had defeated one of these dolls without too much problem. However, there were countless more rising from the ground. Sonny counted at least several dozen before losing count. What should I do? Fighting the horde of fallen beasts was clearly suicide. He could either retreat or order Saint to draw their attention away and sneak onto the ship. He could also recall one of the shadows, send it ahead, and then use Shadow Step to travel instantly between his current position and the wreck. But that meant leaving Saint weaker. Decisions. Time was running out.
She should be fine for a few minutes, right?
Throwing a glance at the taciturn demon, Sonny sighed and dashed toward the ship.
Have fun, you three,
he thought. Saint looked at him as if she heard his thought, then silently turned away and raised the midnight shard. As Sonny jumped from shadow to shadow, something crashed thunderously behind him.
You have slain a fallen beast.
Sonny smirked.
But don't go having too much fun.
No matter how formidable his demon was when augmented by the shadow and wielding a powerful memory, she was still just an awakened. He had to be swift. As Sonny appeared from a shadow, something massive suddenly lunged at him. Without slowing down, he dove under the blade of another wood wraith, then lashed out with the cruel sight. The silver blade of the sword cut through the body of the abomination, leaving a deep gash on its side. Sonny slid on the moss, escaping from the attack reach of the massive creature. Twisting around, he thrust his sword into empty air. A split second later, however, the hilt of the somber weapon extended, turning it into a long spear. The silver blade pierced the chest of the wood wraith with surprising ease. The sailor doll was still alive, but its soul was damaged. It staggered and took a step forward, driving the spear deeper into its flesh. Sonny tilted his head, then dissolved into shadows and appeared behind the creature. A moment later, the midnight shard pierced its head.
You have slain a fallen beast, Sailor Doll. Your shadow grows stronger.
Sonny retrieved his weapons.
You have slain.
Saint was busy too. Glancing back, he saw that she was close to being surrounded by a mass of menacing wooden creatures.
Not good.
Not wasting any more time, Sonny turned away and continued moving toward the wreck. A few minutes later, Sonny reached the broken ship, dove into one of the breaches in its hull, and hid in the shadows. Then, he immediately dismissed Saint. Making sure that nothing posed an immediate threat to him, he then quickly checked on the taciturn demon in the Soul Sea. The shadow had received several wounds in the fight against the swarm of wraiths, but none of them was too serious. She was going to have to spend some time restoring herself in the nurturing black flames of the Shadow Core still.
Rest well, Saint. You deserve it.
Sonny hesitated for a few moments, then retrieved the memories he had entrusted to her. Who knew what he was going to encounter inside the ancient ship? It was better to be safe than sorry. Looking around, he studied the interior of a small room he had found himself in. Sonny had no knowledge whatsoever of what the insides of a ship were supposed to look like, let alone of an archaic wooden vessel like this one. That was why he couldn't even guess what purpose this cabin had been intended for. All he saw were piles of debris, absolutely mundane for a change, and thick brown vines covering the walls. The air was stale and murky. It smelled a little sweet.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
With a subtle shudder, Sonny stared at the strange reddish-brown vines. Those things, without a doubt, were alive. They were also the source of the sweet smell permeating the air that Sonny was currently breathing. What was even worse, they were obviously just a small part of some much, much larger organism. As a strange feeling appeared in his lungs, Sonny sighed, took a piece of cloth from his pack, and wrapped it tightly around the lower part of his face.
Bloodweave to the rescue. Let's see what's inside.
He didn't want to anger whatever this creature was, but he had to get a better sense of what he was dealing with. The last thing Sonny needed was to be enslaved by another venomous plant. And this one seemed to have more than enough creatures out there to do its bidding. He only took a few steps when something gleamed on the floor in front of him. Bending down, Sonny picked up the small object and stared at it with a complicated expression. A heavy golden coin rested in his palm. Grasping the coin in his fist, Sonny took a step forward, then cautiously walked around a thick vine sprawled across the floor of the cabin. Or was it a wall? Since the ancient ship was laying on its side and at an angle, it was hard to differentiate the floor from the ceiling. The surface beneath Sonny's feet was skewed, forcing him to bend to be able to keep balance. The piles of debris and the vines weren't making things any easier for him. By now, Sonny was almost sure that the vines were a part of a larger creature. His suspicion only grew when he climbed through the narrow doorway and left the cabin. Finding himself in a wide corridor, Sonny felt that the sweet smell permeating the murky air became much stronger. Here, everything was covered by a thick layer of reddish moss, with twisted vines growing through it as they stretched in every direction. Sonny couldn't help but feel as though he was now inside some giant being, with the wooden carcass of the ancient ship serving as its bones, the moss representing its flesh, and the vines being its veins. The warm breeze that blew through the wreck at rhythmic intervals reminded him of the slow breathing of a slumbering giant. It came from somewhere deeper in the ship, bringing with it the sickly sweet smell, and then disappeared for a dozen seconds, only to appear again.
Let's, not do anything to awaken that thing, then.
Sonny thought for a few moments, and then decided to keep both shadows wrapped around his body instead of sending them to explore the ship. In situations where a confrontation with an unknown enemy could happen at any moment, having them close by was of paramount importance. At least, that approach had saved his life many times in the past. Taking a step forward, he felt the moss spring under his foot and then swayed. His vision blurred slightly. His worst expectations did not come true. Unlike the blood blossom, the tiny grains of pollen, or spores, or whatever it was that he had breathed in, had not tried to take root in his lungs and grow through his flesh. Instead, they simply poisoned him. The poison had entered his lungs, then traveled to his bloodstream, and was now spreading through his body. Sonny could easily see himself losing consciousness and falling to the ground, his body then becoming overgrown by the reddish moss, slowly digested by it, turned into nourishment for the creature that had usurped the wreck of the ancient ship. But he wasn't going to. As soon as the poison entered his bloodstream, Bloodweave went into a frenzy. It seemed to really dislike anything alien invading its territory. Slowly but surely, it went about destroying the toxin. Sonny just had to endure the pain. Summoning the cruel sight, he used the shaft of the spear to help himself keep balance and waited for his vision to become clear again. After a minute or two, Sonny slowly exhaled and continued on his way. A few minutes later, still suffering from pain and weakness, he picked up a second coin from the moss and stared at it for a second. The beautiful person with a crescent moon drawn on their forehead smiled at him with a carefree expression. Sonny frowned in response.
What are you so happy about, fool?
Turning away, he noticed another coin gleaming in the moss a couple of meters further down the corridor. It was almost as if someone had left these coins here, like breadcrumbs, to lead an unsuspecting treasure hunter to their prize.
Very convenient.
Full of unease, Sonny walked over to the third coin, picked it up, hid it in his pack, and then cautiously moved deeper into the wreck. Soon, he approached a wall with a massive gate barring it. The wooden surface of the wall had cracked and was bent outward as if something was pressing heavily on it from the other side. The vines out here were especially thick and vernicose, shining in the beams of sunlight that fell through a wide hole in the hull of the ship right above. The sweet smell in the air was almost overwhelming. Sonny stared at the warped wall, a grim expression on his face. Although he could not see through it, he could feel the shapes of shadows on the other side. Hidden from him by the thick bulkhead was a much larger, vaster, and open space. He judged it to be the main cargo hold of the ancient ship. Something massive was moving in it, slowly expanding and contracting. Brown vines that had devoured the wreck all originated from that place. The sickening breeze that blew through the ancient ship from time to time came simultaneously with the contracting of the massive shadow. Sonny lingered for a while, then decided that he had no desire to disturb the slumber of that being. Instead of trying to open the door, he jumped up, grabbed the edges of the hole above him, and climbed onto the exterior of the ship's hull. He was reasonably sure that a treasure, such as miraculous coins, would not have been stored in the main hold with the rest of the mundane cargo anyway. Unless he was absolutely certain that he had no other choice, he was not going to enter it. Sonny was of a rather high opinion about his abilities, but not so high as to forget all fear. That thing inside was not for him to fight. At least, not yet. How was he supposed to kill a giant mass of vines and moss anyway? Instead of trying, he walked down the sloping hull of the ancient ship, carefully avoiding breaches through which thick brown vines were crawling outside, and soon passed the area of the main cargo hold. Now, he was approaching the shattered bow of the ship. Out here, the hull was heavily damaged, with most of it being riddled with wide cracks, jagged holes, and splintered boards. The sight of it made Sonny wonder about what had happened to the graceful ship he had seen on the miraculous coins. The vessel was obviously not an ordinary one. Why had it crashed here, on that remote island? Why was its bow in such a devastating condition? What had the ship sailed on to begin with? Had it just flown through the skies? If so, maybe the crushing had gotten to it. Feeling that he wouldn't be able to remain hidden in the shadows on this treacherous surface, Sonny crawled back inside and landed softly on the carpet of moss. Just a few steps from where he found himself, several golden coins were gleaming on the ground, with one more laying further down the dark corridor. Sonny cautiously gathered them, then moved deeper into the wreck. It wasn't long before he found the compartment that must have served as the ship's treasury. He knew that there was something special about it instantly, simply for the fact that the floorboards around the heavy door were the only place on the entire ship that was completely free of the reddish moss, the vernicose vines, and the air near it was void of the sickeningly sweet smell of the poisonous spores. Standing in front of the door, Sonny smiled.
Eureka!
Sonny approached the heavily reinforced door and tried to sense if something was moving on the other side of it. There was nothing. He pressed his ear against the cool, smooth surface. The silence was almost too perfect, making him second-guess his instincts. He couldn't help but wonder if the absence of sound was a sign of something. But it didn't feel as though something dangerous waited for him inside the treasury, On the contrary, with how fresh the air was and how clean the floorboards were, the treasury looked almost inviting. He wasn't entirely convinced, though. Sonny lingered for a bit, then commanded one of his shadows to separate itself from his body and slide under the door. It was going to remain very close, so he was willing to risk weakening himself for a bit.
How do I even open this thing?
A moment later, Sonny grimaced and covered his face with his palm.
When did I become this stupid?
Looking through the eyes of the happy shadow, he saw the armored compartment in its entirety. It was a large room with a high ceiling and 3 heavy chests standing in its center. The entire back wall of the treasury, though, was missing, letting in a flood of sunlight through the jagged edges of a massive breach.
Of course it's missing.
The chain worm had to have gotten inside somehow, after all. Sonny doubted that the demon could have fit through the door of the treasury, let alone politely lock it behind himself after leaving. He sighed, then shook his head and decided to attribute this momentary lapse of judgment to the taxing nature of having to endure the pain of being poisoned. No one was there to witness him making a fool out of himself anyway. Regardless, there was no terrifying nightmare creature laying in wait on the other side of the reinforced door. Nothing was going to attack him if he entered. Sonny considered climbing back on top of the hull of the ship and finding a way to enter through the breach in the back wall of the treasury, then simply stepped through the shadows and appeared inside. He was too excited and impatient to waste any more time. Not to mention that the more time he spent here, the more chances there were of something going terribly wrong. If there were really hundreds of coins in one of those chests, though, that would be a trophy to put all other trophies to shame. A find of a lifetime. Sonny waited for a couple of seconds, letting his eyes adapt to the bright light of the sun, and then studied the 3 chests standing in the middle of the armored compartment. All 3 were open. 2 stood empty, but the third... His eyes widened in shock. The 3rd chest was long and adamantine, its dark wood reinforced by strips of dull metal. It was large enough to fit an adult man, and filled to the brim with heavy gold coins. Some spilled out of it and were laying on the floor in a tantalizing pile, showing either the beautiful face of the mysterious charmer or the reverse, depicting the ancient ship.
Thousands! There are thousands of them!
Sonny felt his heart skip a bit and swayed slightly. He counted his breathing to make his anxiety go away. In front of him was a treasure that would take him all the way to forming a 3rd core, and then some. With this many miraculous coins, Sonny would be able to annihilate the gap between himself and Nephis, maybe even overtake her.
This can't be true.
He instinctively wanted to think that it had been far too easy, but it wasn't really. He had almost died while fighting the Mirror Beast, allowed Saint to be injured in a fight against sailor dolls, and walked through the poisonous darkness of the ancient wreck. If it wasn't for the Bloodweave, he would have been already dead. How many people out there could boast about carrying the legacy of a daemon in their veins? For almost anyone else, this trip would have been fatal. Not to mention that very few could have made the series of discoveries and logical conclusions that would lead them here. So, no, it wasn't too easy to get to where he was currently standing. It wasn't easy at all. And anyway, Sonny was due for a bit of good luck. Recently, nothing had really gone his way. Take this whole mongrel fiasco, for example, or everything that had happened in the Crimson Spire. The heavy chest stood silently, surrounded by sunlight. The golden coins shined in the bright radiance, inviting him to come and take them. Sonny gulped. This sight was so beautiful. His eyes gleamed with avarice.
Don't mind if I do.
Taking a couple steps forward, he approached the chest.
Gold is heavy. How am I going to carry all of this back to the sanctuary? Damnation. I won't be able to enter the shadows with all that burden, too. That is a problem.
He reached for the coins, but then stopped suddenly. His hand hovered just outside the invitingly opened chest. Something wasn't quite right. Sonny frowned.
What is it? Maybe I can bury the chest and make several trips. Wait. No. What's wrong here?
His frown deepened. There was no danger inside the treasury, nor was there anything moving outside of it. The terrifying creature that had been slumbering in the cargo hold of the ancient ship was still asleep. There were no sailor dolls wandering nearby, too. So, what was disturbing him? An unsettling quiet hung in the air, making Sonny feel as though something was watching him from the shadows. But that's all it was. A feeling.
The chain worm. The chain worm had swallowed several coins. He also had a piece of the chest in his stomach. The wood splintered, the strips of metal torn.
Sonny had even thought how lucky he was that the demon decided to feast on the metal reinforcing the chest and bit a chunk out of it, swallowing the coins in the process. So if he had torn a piece from the chest, why wasn't the chest missing a piece? And what had mortally wounded the chain worm anyway? Confused, Sonny glanced at the two empty chests. They were perfectly whole, with no parts missing. Then, he looked back at the large, heavy chest in front of him, his hand still hovering a few centimeters away from the pile of gold inside. The chest had all its corners, too. One of them, though, was of a slightly different color, like a patch of new skin that had grown over a wound and didn't quite match all the rest. Since when were chests capable of healing?
What the hell?
Before Sonny could finish the thought, though, the chest seemed to have sensed his hesitation. It suddenly lurched forward, and as massive, jagged teeth suddenly appeared from beneath the gold, its heavy lid closed on Sonny's hand with a sickening sound of breaking bones.